All right. Ready?
Yep. 5:59.
That in the
Come up here, push the button.
budget. Make it
On record.
All right. I'd like to call to order the City of Lincoln City Budget Committee meeting. Today is Monday, April 29th. The time is now 6 o'clock. And one second. I'd like to have a roll call, please.
Dick Anderson.
Yes.
Larry Armstrong.
Here.
Judy Casper.
Here.
Estelle Harlan. Here. Deanna Hinton.
Here.
Riley Hoagland.
Here.
Kevin Hohenbaum.
Here.
Diane Coos.
Here.
Rick Mark.
Here.
Chester Norikis.
Here.
Nancy Oxenholt.
Here.
Mitch Parsons.
Here.
Elaine Starmer. Susan Walke.
Here.
Thank you all very much for being here. I appreciate that. I would like to say for those that wish to speak before the Budget Committee, please sign up at the sheet near the entrance door to Council Chambers. You'll be called to speak during agenda item number G, comments from citizens present. Would now like to open the floor for nominations for the Lincoln City Budget Committee Chairman.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I nominate Riley Hoagland.
Second.
Here.
We have a motion and a second from Mr. Parsons. Thank you. Like to hear any other nominations for chairman for the Budget Committee? Hearing none, may I have a motion to close the nominations?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to close the nominations for Budget Committee Chair.
I'll second that.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second by Mr. Hohenbaum. And may we have a roll call to close the
All in
nominations?
favor?
Yeah, I'm sorry. All in favor. Thank you.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And oppose? All right, very good. Thank you all very much.
I
And-
move to appoint Riley Hoagland as chair of the City Budget Committee.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Another all in favor, say aye.
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 And oppose?
Nope.
I don't know. That was not a.
That didn't come out.
That
of
was
my
not a no.
That was not
All
a
right, all right. Thank you. No, it was not. No. Yeah, thank you. All right, thank you all very much. I appreciate that. May I now? I would like to open the floor to nominations for vice chairman.
Mr. Chair, I nominate Susan Walke.
Second.
I have a motion and second by Mr. Parsons. All right. Any other nominations for the vice chair for the Budget Committee?
I move we close nominations.
Thank you.
Second.
A motion and second. Motion, Mr. Hohenbaum, and second by Ms. Walke. And all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Unopposed? Very good.
Mr. Chair, I nominate Susan Walke as Vice Chair.
All right.
Second.
Move to appoint.
Oh,
Move to appoint,
Thank
excuse
you.
me. I move
Thank
to
you.
appoint Susan Walke as Chair, Vice Chair.
Mr. Mark was a second on that. I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good.
Thank you. Great job.
Thank you. All right. Very good. Thank you all very much for being here. We have nice public attendance. That's very great. I like that. Mr. Chandler, can you go over the rules of procedure, please?
I can. First of all, welcome to our new members of the Budget Committee. It's a pleasure to have you here with us, and hope you enjoy this experience. On the program tonight, it lists public comments. We did advertise that as a public hearing for the state shared revenue. So, Mr. Chair, when you call for that, it is a public hearing for the state shared revenue specifically, and other public comments.
Which would likely be the second meeting for the public hearing.
No, we
No,
advertise it for
it
tonight.
is for tonight. Okay.
Yes, sir. On your, I've given you 3 documents before the meeting began. This first page is please replace the first page of your budget message with this page. There was a couple of discrepancies that I will point out as we go through. The second is the first page of the budget itself. This page, it begins with budget resources by type 2019-20. Please replace that. Yes, there's on the back. And then finally, Committee Member Hinton had sent some questions I've given you a copy of those questions, and as we go through those, we will touch on those. We won't reach all of them tonight because we're not going to get to all of these different sections of the budget. As I had mentioned with the Urban Renewal Agency budget, as far as some procedures go, those all, I hope, still to apply. Let me give you just a little bit of one other thing I wanted to bring up for those that may be streaming this. The items that you see on the screen, we will try to follow along with those. If you want to pull up the city's budget, you can go to the city's webpage, and down at the bottom of the main page, it says Notice of City Budget Committee Meeting and Proposed Budget, and you can pull up the budget there and just follow along with us. Last year, we did try to put a PowerPoint together. It was very difficult to follow. So these will just be the same pages that the Budget Committee members will see. The process, the budget has changed a little bit this year, except for one aspect of it. I always like to start with something a little bit visual and a little bit fun. One of the main changes that we've done in the budget this year is to try to show the budget by the services and the goods that we actually produce and deliver. Normally, we have just simply shown it as by fund, and the budget message has been very text-heavy. This time, we tried to include a little bit more visual to it, and especially to show it by what we actually produce and deliver. That's why I have these bottles of water that are up in front of us. And there has been much conversation that we have heard in the state legislature about our environment, and specifically to plastic bags, and it's been a very vigorous discussion. Absent from that discussion has been bottled water, which I find to be very interesting. I purchased last week these 5 bottles of water. One of them cost 69 cents for the bottle, $1.19, $1.29, $1.50, and $1.89. That's for 20 ounces of water. The cost to buy that from the city is 0.0012 cents, less than a tenth of a penny. Okay? Now, here's what's interesting. We provide 400 cubic feet of water to our residents, to each water connection every month. That cost is $23.88. If you were to buy that much of cubic water in this bottle, it would cost $13,784.
Whoa, doggies. Wow.
This bottle, 23,000. I didn't look at the number, 700 and something. The next one, $25,770. The next one is $29,966. And the last one is $37,756. For the equivalent of water, we sell for $23.88.
I feel like this is The Price is Right.
Now, what is very interesting about it, it is 400 cubic feet of water is 399,540 ounces of water. In order to buy this many bottles, you would have to buy 19,977 bottles to get what you get out of your tap from the city. And here's the other part that's very interesting. I also brought a bottle of dirt. 20 ounces of dirt costs 17 cents. Okay? That would cost to get the equivalent of 400 cubic feet of water, $3,396. Our most precious resource we sell cheaper than dirt. Now,
Good, very good.
in all of our discussions, the thing that I wanted to point out is this symbol. We generally think of this as the recycling symbol. It is not. It is the environmental symbol. And the 3 triangles represent reduce, reuse, and recycle. You never have to recycle if you never generate the trash to begin with. So I wanted to use this as a little bit of an illustration because the budget is geared this year to really talk about the services that we provide and the effects that budget changes would have on how they would affect the services. Okay.
That was fun.
All right. Briefly on the process, the budget participants include the following individuals. There's the budget officer. The charter appoints me to be the budget officer for the city manager, and I'm assisted by the staff. Two people in particular, I could not do this without, Scott Morgan and Debbie Bridges. They are fantastic people to work with on this, and I could not get this done without them, as well as all of our employees. You, the budget committee. Budget committee is made of 14 members, 7 of whom are the city council and 7 of whom are appointed by the city council. Your job is to review the budget that I submit and to approve that budget and recommend it to the city council. The adoption of the budget requires the majority of the total membership to approve it. So in other words, you have to have 8 people approve it, no matter how many people are sitting up in the chair. Okay. Once the budget is approved by you, it is received by the city council, who can, I'm sorry, let me jump back to you a little bit more. You have the, we'll talk about this a little bit more in a minute, to review, amend, add, delete, change the budget as you see fit. The city council receives the approved budget from you. They also have the authority to accept, reject, add, or delete from the budget. There are some limits that they have. If they hit one of those limits, it means they have to essentially start the public process over again. And then finally, there is the public, and the public has opportunities to speak both before the budget committee and the city council before first the approval and then second the adoption of the budget. It's important to note that one of the differences in this budget is that because it is made up by the delivery of services, it breaks up a little bit the funds. And it's important to understand that in government budgeting, it is fund budgeting, which means each fund is a separate self-balancing set of accounts. And there's multiple funds. In the council communication that went with your packet, I have listed all of those different funds. There are generally 4 types of funds that you will find. One type is governmental funds. Those are funds that are supported by tax revenues. They are, the one that most people are familiar with is the general fund. That covers our police, our recreation, our finance, city manager's office, and so forth. The second are enterprise funds. Those are primarily our utility funds. They are meant to operate more like a business, in that they are not supported by taxes. They are supported by the fees and the services that are charged for the product that is produced. The third is capital budgets. Often a budget is created to track, or a fund is created to track specific capital projects. Sometimes that's required statutorily. Other times, such as in the case of our police department building that we're constructing, we have done that separately. Then you have internal service funds. These are funds in which the customer of the internal service fund is the city itself. So we have one internal service fund that has 3 components to it. We have vehicle maintenance, we have informational technology, and we have geographical informational systems. They charge all of the other departments just the same as though they were a regular business. And so for the time that IT is helping out police is being charged for that time. And then finally, there is one other one, and that's debt service funds. And those funds account for the service of our debt that we have. So it's important to note that as we go through these, and as you look at these numbers, as we talk about, the best example is Public Works. Public Works will deal with multiple funds, okay? But each fund has to be a self-balancing set of accounts. Now, what that really means in your budget is that things get double counted in the way it's presented. So, for example, the general fund, the general fund will transfer monies over to another fund. Those will be counted as revenues in the other fund, even though the original revenues started with the taxes. Funds were transferred over, they become revenues for the next fund, and then the expenditure. So you see a double revenue, double expenditure of the same, for the same thing. That's just something you can't get away from. It is part of governmental budgeting and governmental accounting. Okay. Now, our proposal for the process of approving the budget, we mentioned this a little bit in the Urban Renewal Agency, and that's that what we'd really like to do we have scheduled 3 meetings. We'd like to use the last meeting to provide all information that you have requested as far as possible changes to the budget, so that you can see how it affects the budget as a whole. And so we ask that on whatever meeting is, if you finish in 2 and you vote in the 3rd meeting, that meeting is devoted just to analyzing the effects of the possible changes and then voting on it. If it takes you 3 meetings to get through all of the questions that you have, then we would request a 4th meeting in which you, again, just deal with the possible amendments that may come forward. Okay. Are there any questions on the process? Okay. If my throat goes out on you, I apologize, and I'll just turn it over to Debbie to finish. If you go to the budget message, page 1, the total budget for all revenues, for all funds, is $72,367,170. That's a significant increase over last year, but there's a reason for that, and we'll come to that in just a minute. You will see that, first of all, the budget is a healthy budget. The city is benefiting from some policies and practices that have been in place for the last few years, and we're seeing those things come to fruition. And I would just like to mention those as a reminder of the policies that previous city councils have adopted. First is the utility rate. This budget anticipates a 4.1 increase in the utility bill, and which equals $2.15 per month. And this will be devoted to the sewer fund. Over the last 2 years, the City Council had discussed quite extensively how to fund some of the long-range sewer projects. We estimated that we would need about $1 million per year to do that. In the past, we have done that through general obligation bonds, which have obligated property tax to do that. The City Council was not supportive of the idea of increasing property taxes and looked for a different way to do that. So normally in the past, what we have done is that the increase that we have seen in the utility rates has been split between the water fund and the sewer fund. Beginning last year, and then this year, and probably another year, maybe 2, but at least 1 more, all of that increase is dedicated to the sewer fund. You will see the effect of that in just a few minutes as we go through that. And that increase will ultimately give the sewer fund about $1 million per year that will be available for capital projects. Street overlay projects. I think this is our 4th or 5th year into our street overlay projects. We started this with the first budget that I was involved with, where we set out as a goal to overlay all of our streets over a 20-year period. We estimated the cost would be $400,000 a year to do that, and this budget is carrying that forward. And again, that's significant because it requires some contributions from the general fund in order to make that happen. PERS, the Public Employees Retirement System. continues to be a major challenge for everybody that's involved, every governmental agency that's involved in that. Every 2 years, they're increasing around 20%. The rates that we're seeing this year are between 15.8% and 26.7%, depending upon what retirement benefit the employee had when they came on in the service. One of the policies that that rate jumps every 2 years. One of the policies that we have adopted in past budgets and are carrying forward is to split that increase out over 2 years, so that you're not trying to absorb it all in 1 year. So you'd have a 10% increase 1 year in an off year, and then another 10%. And so this budget carries that forward. General fund fund balances. In the past, we have established some minimum fund balances that we wanted to maintain. In the general fund, the fund balance is broken out into 2 parts. One is an unappropriated fund balance, which means that those funds cannot be used during that year. There are some very rare circumstances when they can be used, and those are generally in really dire emergencies. And so that has become the city's rainy day fund. And this budget maintains that $6 million fund balance. The other part of it is a contingency. That's if, for some reason or other, we're going over in some of our expenses, we screwed it up somehow on our budgeting and we're going over, you can draw from the contingency. And we have tried to keep that somewhere in around the $1.8 to $2 million range, and I think it's at $2 million for this year. General fund revenues over expenditures. Over the last few years, we have had general fund revenues over expenditures that have been somewhere between $900,000 to $1 million. The City Council of the Budget Committee recommended, and the City Council adopted the policy that those would be used for one-time expenses, and act as a buffer against inflation. And this budget continues to follow that policy. Now, one thing that's a little bit different from the past 2 years is that we did not specifically identify possible expenditures for those funds. This budget includes a $1.7 million transfer from the general fund to the capital facilities fund. We'll talk more about that in detail, but about $500,000 of that is discretionary. And there's been some discussion by some of our counselors on the City Council of how to use those, and we'll discuss that when we get to the capital facilities fund. And then finally, marijuana taxes. As we are now in our second year of the marijuana taxes, we're getting a better handle of what the amount of money is coming in from those taxes. Last year we budgeted $85,000. We were too low on that by about 48%. We estimate that the amount that will actually come to us is about $150,000. In some of our priority meetings with the City Council, there was discussion about how to use those funds, and since they really haven't been established for a use, could we earmark them or identify them for a specific purpose? So in this budget, it's in the marijuana fund. There's a marijuana fund expenditure that is just listed as inactive, and for you to discuss to determine how you would like to allocate those funds. And again, we will discuss those more when we get to that part of the budget. A couple of other things that are important to mention. Our largest revenue source, all funds combined, is our charges for service. It makes up 13%, or just above $9.5 million. Property taxes comes in at 12%, just above $8.5 million. Transient room taxes are third largest at 10% of the budget, and it comes in at $7.4 million. Intergovernmental revenues, those are revenues that we receive from other governmental agencies. They could be one-time revenues in the form of a grant, or they could be ongoing revenues in the form of the motor vehicle allocation or the gas tax. Those are coming in at, we estimate to be $1.6 million. License and permits for all funds is at 2% of $1.2 million, and then franchise fees, which we receive from different utility companies, comes in at a little bit more than 1.1 million. The others make up a smaller amount, but there are a couple things that need some special mention. Transfers, as I mentioned, this is fund budgeting and fund accounting, which means that you're having to count transfers from one fund to another as a revenue source. So the transfers in over all funds comes to $5.2 million. So those are counted as revenues. Beginning fund balances, or we just kind of calling it beginning balance for this purpose, also counts as a revenue. Beginning balances is the accumulated cash that, or funds that we have collected over the years. That currently is, all funds is $35,620,418. That's where you'll see why this budget is so much higher than last year. $10,367,957 of that is from the proceeds that we received when we issued the bonds last year for the police building. The police building is a $12.6 million project. We issued the bonds in the spring, in the fall, and construction began after the first of the year. The construction won't be completed until January of 2020, so these proceeds carry forward. But because of, again, of governmental accounting, you have to count them as a revenue source when it's really cash on hand. Okay. So our beginning balance without the bond proceeds is $25,227,700, which is our largest revenue source, actually. The other thing that we've done in our budget, we've always tried to do this in the budget, but in this case, we made it more of a point to spell it out, and that is the City Council's goals and priorities and how the budget reflects those goals and priorities. At the beginning of this year, the City Council met and determined what their goals were. I've listed those on this. This is the last page of the budget message of what their priorities. The first priority they had is community support or social support. These services provide assistance to individuals and families that are in need. I typed this up as the outside agency request. The City Council just changed this in our last meeting to be nonprofit requests. This budget allocates $50,000 to go to the applicants for the nonprofit donations. As I mentioned, the marijuana tax is $152,888, which can be used as discretionary funds for this area. Those funds are contained in the non-departmental budget, which we will get to. And then, as I mentioned, we transferred $1.7 million into the Facilities Capital Fund. That fund is meant to fund many and most of our general fund type of capital projects, right? Thank you. About $500,000 of that is discretionary, and we'll get to that when we get a little bit more. Code enforcement, committee member Hinton had asked a question about code enforcement on how the budget reflects the code enforcement. We increased the budget in one area for code enforcement, and that includes $25,000 for camp cleanup of homeless camps that we're finding in our open space. It costs anywhere from $5,000 to $7,000 to clean up one of those sites, and we're getting 2 to 3 of them per year. So we put in at $25,000 for that. The rest of it, we didn't feel we needed to add funds to the budget. It's more of a reallocation of our existing resources and the priorities that our personnel are taking and how we approach code enforcement that we think that we'll be able to accomplish the City Council's goals. Parks and Recreation and Park Development was one of the City Council's goals. Specifically, they identified 2 parks. The Taft Park, there continues to be a $400,000 included for the purchasing of the Taft property. We are in negotiations with the school district. Those negotiations are going well, but they're slow because we are waiting on some EPA approvals from the EPA. And we're not expecting to get those until at least after July, and maybe not until the 1st of 2020. So that money is still dedicated, as well as the city had about $500,000 that was bequeathed to the city several years ago. It was to be used for some park development, specifically for some tennis development, and that is also within the budget. The Parks Committee also had recommended, and the City Council approved as one of their priorities, the development of what we call the Keel Park, or the Southeast Third Park. This is the area that's just north of the police building. We own about 19 acres, and when that was donated to the city, a large portion of it, most of it, had to remain as some type of park or open space. We have had a design that has been presented to the Parks Committee and to the City Council that shows a more of an open style park, a forested style park, where you have lots of trails that lead to vistas and play areas. It includes a dog park, and we have budgeted $100,000 for the beginning of the trail construction of that park. And as I mentioned, I already mentioned the marijuana tax, so I won't need to go into that any farther. Another area that the City Council established as a priority is expanding the economic opportunities through both business expansion and workforce housing. Included in this budget is our economic development and workforce housing budget is $833,000. That is significant because 3 years ago it didn't exist. There wasn't an economic development budget. And so Allison Robertson heads up that department, and she is working on the development of both the city's property and working with businesses and organizations that work to provide workforce housing. The city has 2 toolboxes that we use. One of those is for economic development. One of those is for workforce housing. The City Council recently expanded our opportunities to use those funds to go beyond just the urban renewal district where they had been before. So we've added $100,000 to go into the economic development toolbox, and $100,000 to be added to the workforce housing toolbox. Okay, and then I've already mentioned the contingency. Long-range planning, as far as our infrastructure goes. One thing I'm very proud about in this budget is the significant capital investment that we are making. It is our largest expense. Including the police department, our capital expenditures are at about $24 million. Without the police building, it's at $14 million, which is approximately the same as our personnel costs. So I'm very pleased with the investment that the city's making so that we're not deferring maintenance. As you know, ultimately, as you defer maintenance, it will one day catch up with you, and then it is very expensive. So I'm very pleased with that. Finally, emergency preparation is a priority that the City Council had established. We have moved the emergency preparation into the police department's budget, and that is $87,000. $30,000 of it goes to the continuing of purchasing and supplying caches that will go throughout the community. And then the new police building has an will become the emergency operations center for the city, and we've budgeted $57,000 for equipping that, and we'll go through all these in a little bit more in detail. So we are ready to jump in to the budget worksheets. If you're ready, or if you have questions about the message, we'll be happy to answer any questions we can.
Just to reiterate, we will be stopping at 10 o'clock tonight.
We have, my battery actually is doing better. I actually gained 2 minutes.
Turn up the brightness.
It's now 7 hours and 42 minutes.
Excellent. No, not excellent.
Okay.
All right. Additionally, in years past, we've all had things that we would like to do, and if when we get to those sections, before we move on to the next section, if there's something else in that particular section that you guys would like to talk about, or add, or subtract, or do some kind of services, let's talk about it then, at that point, so that the third meeting at 11:38, we're not trying to decide what we're doing and what we would like to change or modify. So, and just keeping with that flow of that, and I know last year that $1 million is what we were using, but let's just keep that in those sections.
So we are beginning on page.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I have questions regarding the message.
Absolutely.
Mr. Chandler, on the first page, fiscal year general fund balance increase 1.7%. What's the rate of inflation, please?
I'll have to get that. I have not calculated that out yet, so.
The last time I looked at the
Rate of inflation.
COLA?
CPI, thank you. The CPI for COLA purposes, it was about 2%. That's been a little while ago, though. I haven't looked at it recently.
So we're just below the rate of inflation.
About,
On the second page, total city resources graph at the top of the page, and fines and forfeitures at the top of the page. Other taxes in the graph is 7 million plus. Other taxes in the text is 4 million for.
Well, you'll notice that when we get to the first page of the budget itself, the way it breaks out, the revenues are a little bit different. For example, it includes things like transient room taxes with other taxes. I broke it out a little bit more detail so that you could see the significance of some of our major revenue sources.
so this graph is based on page 1 of the budget
Yes.
rather than the numbers in the budget message. So it's a different grouping.
Yes, that's correct.
These are confusing numbers,
Right.
just to give you that information.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also,
On page 3, personnel services, that's salaries, Mr. Chandler?
Personnel service would be all compensation to the employees, salaries and benefits.
And you've got 20.5% listed, and in the newspaper, I recall you saying in your interview it was like 70 to 80% of the cost.
No, it depends upon the department. For example, if you look at the library costs, about 76% of its costs are personnel related. But if you look at the facilities capital, it's mostly capital. So it depends upon which department or which fund that you're actually looking at as to what that breakout really is.
So the average is 20.5?
Yes, sir.
And on that same page, contingency is listed at 8.3 million, and I thought I heard you say 6 million.
There's two parts to the fund balance. There's a contingency of 2 million and a unappropriated fund balance of 6 million. So it combines the two together.
But this contingency, the 2 million contingency is just for the general fund. And this contingency would be citywide contingency, so it would include contingencies in all the other funds as well.
total city contingency.
Yeah, it's total city, so includes.
So there's a
Thank
little
you.
confusion between the two sides of that.
I was also a little confused, though I finally understood you used the same color twice in that first graph, and two different things, and that was a bit confusing. But I finally figured it out that you started property tax at 12 o'clock and went clockwise.
You know what? I would like to take credit for that, but that's just the way Microsoft Publisher did it.
Any other questions regarding the budget message itself?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chandler, you said the contingency is 8304467. Can you tell us what the contingency was in our last budget?
Yeah. general fund, the ending fund, no, I'm looking at general fund. Oh, got it. Last year it was $5,435,982 is the budget.
Is the budgeted contingency? That was the budgeted contingency last year?
That was the budgeted contingency, yes, sir. And then the unappropriated fund balance was $7,484,294.
Can you reflect and know that budgeted contingency of 5 point whatever, how much of that was actually used?
Yeah, the differences that you're seeing in that is that we had several projects, particularly in our public works projects, that were meant to be completed this year, but were not. And so you're seeing those carry forward over as a beginning amount. Part of what we're also looking at with our budget this year is that we've tried to break out some of our construction projects into 2-year cycles, so that you'll see during this year there will be the permitting process, the engineering, and then the second year will be the construction. We found that for many of the projects that we had last year, we just have not been able to get through all of the permitting process that's necessary to get them done.
Okay. Are we going to address those ones that carried forward when we
We
get to
will.
that part of it?
Yeah. Okay. All right. Again, the first 10 pages of the budget itself, past the budget message, are the shows the budget by fund. Okay, so when you see the budget summary by type, you'll see the type of revenue it is. Then you'll see it listed for each fund. This is the very traditional part of fund budgeting. Okay, on page 2, again you see the services that are provided, and they are broken out by either a department within the general fund or a fund itself, with the total budget being $72,367,170. The breakdown that you see on this is that your personal services, which is your employee compensation and benefits, is $14,833,977 for all funds. I'm on page 2. Materials and surfaces or operations cost is $9,456,333. Capital is $24,806,442. And I might point out that you'll see a big part of that includes the police building. And that's when I mentioned that our capital without the police building comes in at right around $14 million. Debt service is $2,994,444. Transfers are $5,280,486. The contingency all funds are $8,304,467. The general fund specifically is located in the general fund non-departmental, which is about a third of the way down, and that is $2 million. And then I mention that because that's the one that actually has the greatest amount of flexibility. And then finally, the unappropriated fund balance is $6,691,021, again, for total expenditures of $72,367,170. Page 3 is the tax levy calculation, and I'm going to have Debbie explain that one.
I think this format is a little odd, but it's one we've used for a very long time, so I just continue using it. The top section, the top box, is looking at what do we require to what's our requirements for collecting property tax, and then the second box or the bottom box is how we actually calculate the property tax amounts. There are 2 funds that receive property taxes, the general fund and there's a limit on how much we can assess for the general fund, and that limit is actually what the tax rate that is shown is at the $4 and 4.0996. That's our legal limit. The other fund that receives property tax is our sewer bond fund. Some of our sewer bonds are paid, or our sewer bonds are paid by property taxes, and that is a voter-approved property tax levy. So the general fund is really determined by the rate, and the sewer fund is determined by how much debt payments that we have to make. So just kind of going over the calculations. So the bottom box in the general fund, we take what our assessed value is for the city for this current 2018-19 year, and then we increase it 3%. We use 3% because that's the maximum that the increase in assessed value. Then we take out the 20% of that goes to urban renewal, and we end up with an estimated assessed value for 2019-20 of $1,786,000,000, so forth. You multiply that by the tax rate, and that gives you the gross taxes, and then we estimate a not collected amount, and the ending estimated taxes for the general fund is the $6,810,885. The sewer bond, we calculate it really based on the budget, so we use the top section to calculate the amount. And the sewer bond requires about a $1.7 million resources, and you back out revenue sources that you have from things other than property taxes, so it might be like interest income or transfers from other funds. And that gives us a $1.5 million that we need to collect to make our debt payment, and add in an estimate for bad debt. And so we're actually going to assess $1,557,000 in property taxes for the sewer bond. So, kind of a fun.
Have you used the same method of calculation for last year's?
Yes, it's the same every.
So
yeah.
reflecting back on last year, how does the calculated estimated taxes to be collected match up with the actual taxes collected?
It's pretty close. The variance, so in the general fund, we use a modified accrual approach, so we recognize property taxes as they're paid, and so that can vary depending on,
Sure.
on the bad debt. In the sewer fund, it's a full accrual level, and so the bad debt has less of an impact
Right.
because we do normally eventually collect all property taxes because the properties get liened. So because you're accruing the full amount, there's less of an impact, and it's a lot more, the estimate is a lot closer to the actual, or the accrued actual. But yeah, it comes out pretty close.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chandler, or Debbie, the permanent tax rate, I wonder if it would be possible to maybe provide the committee with per city statewide. I've seen it somewhere at this rate that each city has, because this or I call it a millage rate, but permanent tax rate doesn't change. It's what we're always stuck with. And I like to remind people that it's a formula, that number against the assessed value. So that's why I'm expecting, cards and flowers for when this committee and councils raise the value of their property value, of which they like to show on their balance sheets, that it has nothing to do with us raising their taxes. It's raising their asset. So, and all kidding aside, as I recall, some of the cities south of us is in the $7 range. I think Newport is, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I don't remember.
But it'd be interesting to see, for all of us to see, because I think it's good fodder as people get in your face about property taxes. You can show the millage rate is really very low in Lincoln City.
Yep, that's easy information to pull, so I will do that.
Great, thank you.
On page, any more questions on the tax rate? Yeah, on page 4 is the amortization schedule for our debt, and I'm going to have Debbie explain that one as well.
This should be pretty much a standard amortization schedule. The first line, the 2018-19, shows the principal and interest payments of our various long-term debt for the current year. And then the section below that shows the 2019-20 would be what's in the budget, proposed budget, and shows you just what the future debt payment schedules are. The biggest change this year is the addition of the police building. That's a new one for this year. And then we had a couple couple ones fall off of this schedule as well. And a couple more fall off next year.
Great.
Page 5 is the transient room tax calculation. The transient room tax is distributed according to the city's charter, which spells out exactly how it is to be not only divvied up, but also to be used. And I'm going to have Debbie talk a little bit about how it gets split up.
So the transit room taxes that we receive are two components. We assess 8% based on a charter that was done a long time ago by the city, and that has one distribution method. And then in 2008, the city added another 1.5%, and that actually was had to comply with state regulations, and so we were much more limited in how we could use those revenues, and so that has a second distribution method. So the two combined is a 9.5% tax rate. On page 5, I've shown historic, several years of history of the transit room tax that we've collected at the bottom of the page. I did make a correction in the 16-17 and the 17-18. In 16-17, there was an accrual that was missing, so I did add it in here to normalize the increase. So if you're doing increase comparisons, it makes more sense.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Sure.
Debbie, is this for the amount collected or the balance to be distributed?
The chart at the bottom,
Uh-huh.
it's the total transit room tax dollars that we collected during that fiscal year.
So before the...
Before it so it gets distributed up to the different funds.
Thank you.
So we are estimating a 3% increase for 2018-19. I've looked at the year-to-date revenues, and I think that's not too conservative. Last year we were real conservative, but the year-to-date trend is looking 3%. So then we also use the 3% for the 19-20 estimate for transit room taxes.
Debbie, could you help me understand,
Yes.
furthering Susan's, on the bottom you said it's 7.251, and then you have text collected as 7.861 or 7.468. I don't see that estimated number in either of those numbers. So I'm not sure where that number is compared to the total graph.
Okay, I'm sorry, you said at the bottom you see the
Yep, on the bottom
7251?
right, it estimated
Uh-huh.
is 7.251, but it's not.
Last year, 19.
Oh, I'm on the wrong thing. Oh, okay.
1920.
I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Okay,
Sorry.
so for the
Scotch broom.
the second box in the tax flow, or in the flow chart, says tax collected by city. So what we've got in the 1920 proposed budget is $7,468,000.
I'm sorry. Yes,
Yeah, which
thank
is,
you.
sorry, it's a 3%. I should add that other line down there. That would make more sense.
Well-
I'll do that. Try to remember to do that next year. So according to the way that the charter is written, there's a couple things that we pull straight off the top. Any monies that we have budgeted for transit room tax compliance reviews are paid by these transit room taxes, so that comes straight off the top. And then after that, 5% goes to the general fund for the administration of the transit room tax, filling out, sending out the returns and putting the data, just administering. There's a lot of work there. So after taking off the $40,000 for compliance review and the 5% for the general fund for administration, there's a balance of $7,057,170 for distribution. And the way it's distributed is public safety gets 12.5% of the 8%, and then get 30% of the 1.5%. So that's comes out to $1,077,000.
Of the 1.5, right?
Streets gets 25% of the 8%, And they do not get anything of the 1.5% because you can no longer use transit room tax dollars on the streets. Parks also gets 25% of the 8% and nothing of the 1.5%, same reason. Parks is a little, Parks actually gets split up. The reason why Parks and Streets isn't exactly the same is because some of the transit room tax dollars that goes to Parks pays for 4 line items in the community center. The contracted services, electric, gas, and building maintenance. And so if you take Parks and Community Center and add those 2 numbers, it will equal the same amount as the streets.
Can you say those 4 things again?
Yeah, sorry. Contracted services, electric power, gas, natural gas, and building maintenance. The VCB gets 25% of the 8% and 70% of the 1.5%, so they get $2,265,000. And facilities improvement, which is a real blessing to have this, it gets 12.5% of the 8% and nothing of the 1.5%. But that's a really nice revenue source for helping to keep our city facilities updated. And that comes to $742,000, and that is actually the revenue source that we're using to pay the police bonds for the next few years.
The facility improvements is what you're using to pay the bond?
Yep, yeah. So, questions?
Yeah.
What-
Yes.
If you have estimates looking back the last 5 years, between 13 and 14 and 14 and 15, it increased, increased by 18%. Next 2 years, it actually increased by 7%. Next 2 years, it increased by 2%. The last 2 years, it increased by 8.5%. Then what happens if you are budgeting that we're going to increase 3% and we actually end up increasing 8.5%? What happens that other 5.5%?
It ends up in the ending fund balances of the various funds, and
So
is-
it gets split the same way and is
Yes.
ending fund balance? Okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
then it
It's split the
becomes a
same way, and
revenue
you
for
just
the
have more
next
money
year.
the next
Right.
year.
Thank you.
Ms. Hinton?
Part of the reason that 13-14 and 14-15 were, had big increases was because of the Rhodes End annexation.
Ms. Hinton? Ms. Hinton?
I was-
Ms. Hinton?
I just wanted to ask you a question. You said 3%. So is that, you're assuming that it will increase by 3%, or do you have a magic globe or something? I mean,
Last year was the 1 until Kevin said, "Are you sure?"
Last year was low, but, you know, my numbers.
I see.
You know, you don't want to be so conservative that you're not able to fund things that you should be able to, but you don't want to be over optimistic and end up short of money. You know, 1 year we did only have 2.4%, so, you know.
Ms. Casper?
You mentioned electric.
Yes.
Well, I sort of added up all the electric, and it comes out to $727,850. And I was thinking, well, if we had solar, couldn't we recoup some of those funds? But then I look and I go, or does that come off of TRT money, and is that a vicious loss of money? But it seems like we should be doing something solar-wise to capture this money.
The only electricity that's paid by transit room tax is at the community center. So it's only a small part of that number that you had.
So it's only the electricals
So
for
that
the
is still
community
a
center.
valid question, yeah, because everywhere else in the city, it's not being paid by the transit room tax.
Right, I mean, I can see like park maintenance, water plant,
Yeah.
sewer operation, that's a big one, that's 425,000. But Lincoln Square here, I mean, that's 75,000, we could put a few solar panels up there. Just a thought.
Sure.
Question? When you came up with the 3%, how much of that is based on increased number of tourists versus increased in room rates? The amount that's being collected by the rates going up?
That's a very, very good question. I don't know. We get room rental dollars that from the VRDs and hotels, but again, that doesn't really tell us if it's coming from more tourists or from additional rates, but VCB does a lot, or Explore Lincoln City does a lot of studies on that, so maybe.
I think we can provide you information on how the breakout is happening now. When we did the forecast, it was just based on a percentage increase, but we can certainly provide the information that says this is what the breakout is between the average daily rate versus the number of tourists.
Yes, Mr. Anderson.
Just a point of clarification. Tourists tell me they pay 10.5% TRT, and hotelers tell me they pay 10.5% of their revenue to the city. Is there another 1% that goes to the state?
There is a state percent, yes. I don't know off the top of my head what it is, but there is a.
So that's why why you hear from Debbie, our budget is 9.5, based on a 9.5%, but in fact, there's another tax that the state clips on our poor tourists.
The TRT compliance reviews, I see 40,000, and that was, what did that get us last year? Do you recall? It was one condo unit, 2 houses, and what was it?
Oh, I'll bring that back.
Yeah, and then that against the total percentage of.
In this current year, we only had 30,000 budgeted.
Mhm.
In prior years, we had 40, so I bumped it back up.
Right.
But
That would be something that I'd like to.
okay, are you
Discuss
wanting
further.
to look at what we got for 17-18 or for this current year?
Right. Well, I guess
Or
both
both.
would
Okay.
be great, just to see is what we get for what and the percentage against.
And how many, the number of audits that they're
Right. I
able
think
to
it was. I
perform.
think it was like 29 is what it is in my head, out of the 1,500 or something. Houses, not room.
Okay, I will bring that.
If you go to Tripping,
The next page is 6 through 10. I'm not going to touch on those because we're going to get into those in more detail as we get into the services that are provided. But if you have any questions on the general fund summary, we'll be happy to answer those.
Mr. Chair?
Sir.
On page 2, Mr. Chandler, under planning, we've got 541,000 listed. And on your budget message, on the page with city department heads, for planning, we've got listed 869,000.
I believe you grouped planning and building inspection.
I did.
So add building inspection to that as well?
Okay. And is that the case with economic development as well?
It
Got
is.
two different figures?
It is.
It is. Okay, thank you.
As a matter of fact, in the first services that we're going to discuss, you'll see how funds and departments are getting mixed in to create the total. Again, the attempt that we're making in this budget is to move a little bit away from just strictly talking about fund budgeting and more to talk about these are the level of services that you receive. As you change the budget, this is the effect on those levels of services, so that you're dealing more within the production of the goods and services the city delivers. So it's a little bit of a different approach than we've done in the past. It categorizes it. Basically, the city provides police services, public works, planning, the library, economic development. Who am I missing? Hang on, I've got to go back up to the beginning. Marketing through Explore Lincoln City. And those are the services we provide. All other services, my services, finances, the attorney's services, they are all support services. They support the goods that are produced in the areas of public safety, Public Works, and so forth. And so that's how we try to break out the budget so that you're actually looking at the levels of services that are there. That brings us to discussion of police. I'm going to invite our chief to come up.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, I have some questions about resources.
Okay?
On page 7, miscellaneous franchise fees, 640 was budgeted, but we received 1,500, and we're expecting over 1,500. What was the reason for that big increase?
I will have to look what that is.
Which number, what was the,
Miscellaneous, 420.
420-1007.
1007. And under miscellaneous revenue on page 9, line 4601050 land lease, is that Moe's and Price and Pride, or just Moe's?
It's more than just Moe's, but it's primarily Moe's. But I can bring a listing of that.
Price and Pride.
Is Price and Pride somewhere else?
Lincoln Square.
Lincoln
Is
Square.
it Price? Yeah, Price and Pride's in Lincoln Square.
Okay. That's something, okay. And then under convenience fee, a couple lines down, 0 is proposed. Is that because we've eliminated the usage fee for the debit card?
Well, unfortunately, we're still getting charged, convenience fee. Yes, you're talking about revenue. Yes, that is right. Sorry.
You're not getting any more money because we're not having to pay anymore.
Yeah, yes.
Which I appreciate, thank you.
A lot, our staff really appreciates that too, and finance especially, so thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I had a question back on page 2, and I don't know if maybe this would be touched on later, but the line for Explore Lincoln City, it appears that the total budget in the last column is $4.5 million, and then the chart on the amount distributed from the TRT is estimated to be $2.5 million. So where's that other $2 million?
it's the fund balance.
That's left over, basically. And then on that same line for Explore Lincoln City, under contingency, it's 1.7 million, which just seems, why does Explore Lincoln City need such a large contingency, is kind of what I'm wondering.
Why is that over the, well, there's a couple of reasons. Why is it over the years it has accumulated a balance? Now remember, in a fund balance, it can be contingency, it can be unappropriated, or it can be both. In this case, we put it in as the contingency, which means we can access it. One of the reasons we've been building that up is the desire to build a visitor center, and we estimate that will be about $1 million plus. And so we've been holding that in reserve for that construction.
As a practice, there's really only two funds where we have unappropriated fund balance because of the fact that should something happen, unless it's like, you know, a tsunami, you can't get it if it's unappropriated. And so contingencies are not only to handle if something goes over budget, but it's also where you just place your remaining fund balance. If something comes up that the city council wants to fund that we didn't have budgeted, then if it's in a contingency, we can use that. And a really good example, a few years ago when we bought the villages, it would have been really hard to do that if we had not had good contingencies budgeted. So we rarely, you know, particularly in the general fund, we rarely use hardly any of the contingency, if any. We might use just a little bit of it. Our plan's really not to use it. It's just there if something happens, unexpected.
I thoroughly understand the purpose of contingencies when Public Works comes and says, because there's cost overruns and unexpected construction costs, but for our marketing agency, it seems, but you answered it. I mean,
the other thing is their revenue source is is restricted. We can't take money out of ECB and put it somewhere else. So I mean, we could put it in unappropriated, but that's the only other option we would have. Put it in unappropriated or budget to spend it somewhere else. So,
Just on a side note, I had a constituent didn't complain, but he said his understanding was, he thought that the entire TRT tax went to the Explore Lincoln City. And, well, oh, yeah, they collect a big tax, but it all gets spent on marketing. And so I set him straight and explained all these other places that it goes to. And it just makes me wonder if it's an opportunity to maybe educate the public somewhere along the line on that chart is helpful.
We are actually very fortunate to have the transient room tax. If you drive throughout Oregon and look for a city of 8,000 people that doesn't have the transient room tax, that's what Lincoln City would look like. We are very, very fortunate to have that. And one of the reasons is that it's, when the charter was adopted and to put it in, our parks could not develop the way they are, our police could not develop the way they are, our community center could not develop the way it has.
or streets.
Our streets could not develop the way they have. We are very, very fortunate on those funds. Okay. All right. Invite our chief to come on up. We're ready to begin. We are beginning on page 11 of your budget. This is the police at a glance. One of the things that the budget assumes is that there is a certain level of knowledge that you have about how our different departments run. Debbie and I can do pretty well on the questions about money, but if it's about the departments, that's why we bring the chief up, because he's the man. There are 4 different types of expenses that we have categorized into the police services. They include the police, they include dispatch, they include municipal court, and it includes property abatement. Let me tell you a little bit about each of those. Police service deals with all of those services associated with patrol, and with investigations, with the administration of the police department, with evidence collecting, with evidence processing, and those are all included within the police budget. That is a general fund those are all general fund expenditures. Yes, ma'am.
That's a good question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry for the interruption, but haven't we moved emergency preparedness into the police?
It is.
Under the police, so.
It is now included as part of the police budget. And its
Okay, that's at
expenses,
the bottom. I see it.
we're going to talk about its expenses just a little bit more, and I'll refer you to that. Dispatch is also overseen by our police chief, and they account for all of the dispatching services and personnel for our community. We do contract a little bit of that services out. Committee member Oxenhold had asked me a question prior to the meeting about the changes in the rates that we are charging with the fire company. That has not been fully finished, and so the amount that's in there as a revenue reflects our current policy with them. The third area is in the area of municipal court. Committee member Hinton had asked a question. Let me make sure I find it on the court. How do we set this part of the budget? Has there been an increase in the FTE for the clerk? The thing I'd like to point out is that these are set both, all of our budgets are set both looking backwards and looking forwards. Looking historically what we have spent, there's a lot of things that really don't change significantly from year to year, but then also looking at changes that we are proposing to you that are different. This budget does include increasing the part-time clerk from 0.6 hours, which is 24 hours a week, 0.6 full-time equivalent employee, to 0.75, which is 30 hours. So we are asking for an increase in the hours that she works. We are also in anticipation of new records management program we have that we're purchasing this year. It will be implemented over the next many months. One of the biggest challenges is going to be with the courts to take that all and to convert its filing system into the records management program. I have done this before, and it requires a temp. And so we have, and the court will be probably one of our largest challenges to do that. So we have this budget under the contracted services that you'll find on page 12, under miscellaneous contracted services. That includes a $5,000 to hire a temporary service. Oh, I'm sorry, in courts. Page, what? 16, thank you. So it does include a hiring attempt to help us go through that process.
Notice it was huge.
Okay. All right, I'm still going to just go off of at a glance and then refer you to the different accounts. Again, I'm not going to hit all of the line items that are in part of the budget, but I am going to go through some of the major changes. First of all, overall, the police budget counts for 79% of the total police services. Its budget is $5,015,389. Dispatch accounts for 19%, $1,189,484. Municipal court accounts for 86,568, or 1%. And property abatement counts as $50,700. To some of you, property abatement is a new fund. It has its own separate fund. As part of our code enforcement, there are times when the city has to expend funds for the improvement of properties, and we had not budgeted funds to do this. Last year, we amended the budget to add funds to do this. So far, those funds have not been spent, and so this budget continues with the $50,700 in the property abatement.
Mr. Chandler,
Yes, sir.
what sort of, is the property owner charged? What sort of,
Generally, there would be a lien on property. It could be for repairing some property, or it could be for demolishing property, and there would be a lien that would go on the properties.
Chair, why would it be under police?
Because it
And
falls
not
under,
under-
because it's our code enforcement that is the one that's really enforcing that. Again, it has its own separate fund, and so it's separate from, for accounting purposes, it's separate from the police budget's fund. But for the purposes of management, it really follows under the authority of the code enforcement work. Chair?
Yes, sir.
If, Mr. Chandler, if we budgeted $50,000, and if I understood you right, for this year, that we haven't spent any of that, is that what you said?
Yes.
And why,
Well, we had this year for $50,000, we added $700 to
why
it.
did we add anything if we haven't spent, we budgeted 50 this year, and we didn't spend any of it yet? Why are we adding,
In
why are we
anticipation
increasing
of
it?
the projects that are ahead of us. There are still ones that we are working on. The reason they haven't been done is because we simply haven't brought them to fruition yet.
Also, there was some interest income allocated to this fund, so we just wrote those earnings in.
Thank you.
The major capital purchases that we have for the police department, if you look under capital purchases on page 13, 6310001, we are requesting for 3 vehicles, 2 marked patrol vehicles, and 1 police administration vehicle. And I might point out that some of you are aware that our police department is actively pursuing a K-9 unit, but those funds are being fundraised. They're not coming out of this budget.
Mr. Chandler, you have a relocation allowance, which is 10 grand less than last year. is that when we lose an officer before? You know, I remember we had, we had an officer that left and then that, so I'm just trying to figure that out. And-
It reflects the fact that we've hit full employment in our police department. We do provide incentives for people who are applying, and those include moving expenses and bonuses and things like that. Over the last 3 to 4 years, our major priority with the police department is to become fully staffed, which we are, not completely fully trained. We still have some in the police academy, but I am really pleased to say that we've got a full staff.
Very exciting.
We're keeping our fingers crossed.
Another question I
It's a
had.
bit like shoveling water with a pitchfork.
Well, it's good. It's, you know, it's good. It's a good thing. The property abatement is now at 0,
That's because it's been moved to another fund.
and that's what?
It's on page
17.
Did you
17.
guys already say that?
17.
Oh, I see, okay. That was that set 57. You did, okay. The emergencies, no, I'm sorry. The other question was the code enforcement expense? Did you go over that?
Eva, I'm going to let you.
Page 13.
622-5001.
So that's for unexpected expenses that we might encounter that the officer may need to use. It could be anything from assisting with abandoned vehicles or things like that that can come up that aren't otherwise covered.
Okay. And then the other question I have is the community policing program? Did we just do that? Okay, sorry. I was reading the other part, sorry.
What would you like to know about that?
No, that's fine.
No,
I
Oh, you did,
Yeah,
you,
I have to
oh, I thought you were saying, we just talked about that, Riley.
no.
Sorry. Stop reading.
If
Okay,
it's what I think it is, I'm really happy.
yeah, could you speak to that, Mr.
Chief?
Chief, yes, Palmer?
What we've done is our community outreach programs like the Citizens Academy and everything from Blue Christmas. Last year we started participating in National Night Out. We've got a women's self-defense class that's taken on a life of its own here recently.
Right.
Summer camp that we kicked off last year and some other things. There's a certain amount of expenses that are involved in trying to keep those programs rolling.
So to name it,
And so we actually pulled those out of meeting expenses and created
cool.
to support those.
It's wonderful. It's great to hear.
Chair,
Yes, yes, ma'am.
the other supplies, 39,000.
That's kind of our catch-all for everything from pens and pencils to paper and some.
Office chairs,
Pardon?
office chairs, toner.
I mean,
Oh, okay.
Placement of various pieces of equipment, toner. We run into problems with printers or copiers, that sort of thing. It kind of just all falls into that category.
I just had one last question about the paid vacation. Is that now a mandatory? It was 000 and now it's 15.
It shows in this budget a little odd because when we actually process paid vacation, it goes under salaries and benefits. But
Okay.
when we're projecting salaries and benefits, I mean, I don't have paid vacation in there, and so I had to add it in down here. So, but when it actually gets paid, it gets paid up in salaries. But it is something that we've had for a long time.
Yes, ma'am.
Trying to figure out where
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Ms. Casper.
I noticed on page 12, there's a section called miscellaneous contracted services for $19,800. And I know we have an issue about abandoned vehicles, and I'm hoping we're putting some money in the budget to deal with, especially like RV removal or cars that have to be towed, because I know a lot of time property owners can't afford that. And I know the police get stuck with the bill from the towing company. Is that correct, Chief?
We do. If it's currently under the situation that we're finding ourselves in the current economic climate, the tow companies that we call for non-preference tows have agreed to take abandoned vehicles for us. And there's just 2 of those companies in town right now that are operating for us. With a motor vehicle, there's still barely enough money in the salvage of steel and that sort of thing that they can kind of make ends meet, and they rarely charge us for those. But if we end up with an RV, we had a meeting with them last year, and in order to dispose of the type of RVs and boats and things that would be abandoned and essentially not usable anymore, the disposal companies that the tow companies have to work with are charging by the cubic foot. And so a motorhome could cost anywhere from $1,500 to $3,000 to be hauled away and disposed of. And that comes back, I mean, they can't absorb that cost, and so they're starting to bill us for that.
What did you call that?
The abandonment
And I'm looking at the...
vehicle mitigation
I'm
project?
looking at our detail, and we do not have that in there, so that's one we'd have
Is
to
there-
bring back to you. Abandonment of vehicles? Okay.
Any other questions regarding police? Yes, Mr.
Well, there's a couple other things that I would like to point out, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Because they do represent a couple of significant changes. Also in the Capitol, on page 13, account number 6320201. These are capital purchases again. That this is in the police budget, that includes a body camera, equipment and software. This is a significant change in practice for our police department. It's one that we have not pursued in the past, but the chief has proposed that we add that to the budget this year. And then one of the most significant expenses is in the dispatcher's budget. This is on page 15, account number 6320201. Again, that's capital. There's $150,000 in there to replace our radio consoles and servers. The kind that we have now are beginning to fail, and they need to be replaced. The question that I asked of our chief and our IT director is, aren't these a part of the new building? And they are not. And so that's a cost that we need, that we have added to the budget. I also wanted to mention that this budget includes the addition of a new full-time assistant for the chief. That's found on page 12 in the salaries, 610-110. And we've mentioned the purse before. The other thing that I wanted to mention of a significant increase to expenses is in the area of our legal services. This is a contract year for our union negotiations, and so we, for our police negotiations, we have used an attorney to assist us, and we plan to do that again. And we budgeted $20,000 for that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Mr. Enriquez, may I go to 10, please?
Mr. Chandler, I wonder if the city could send a thank you card to the tow companies that are helping us out.
Certainly can.
Ms.
And
Oxenholt.
Chief, thank you for that women's defense class. Sounds like it was needed and appreciated.
We've gotten some amazing feedback on that, and we've got more classes coming this summer.
Wonderful.
And Mr. Chandler or Debbie, these budget increases with my arithmetic add up to 41.8%. Budget
No.
increase, police 6.5, dispatch 18.3, municipal court 17, property abatement 1.4.
No, you have to break those out. They're not cumulative. The police department is looking at a 6.5% increase. Dispatch is looking at an 18% increase over last year. These are broken out as separate categories in the budget, so they're not cumulative percentages. And so property abatement is an increase by 700, or just 1.4%.
So I'm mistaken in adding these up.
Right.
Wait, if you wanted to calculate it, take the current budget for the 4 funds and the proposed budget for the 4 funds, take the difference, of the total of those four, and then divide it by the current budget of the four.
Any
So-
idea what that might be?
I can run that for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you use instead of using last year's budget, use the estimate for what last year's will actually cost, which is a more accurate number to base the budget off of, then it's a 15% increase
15.
for the police part.
Okay, thank you.
Is that all, Mr.
Sorry.
And a
Mr.
great deal
Norikis.
of this is capital improvements.
150,000 of it, yeah, or plus.
Thank you.
Chairman, one last question?
On that note, or separate? We have two other people here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
but, okay, Ms. Oxenholt.
Okay. Could you just give us the amount of staff you have, and that might make it a little clearer?
Currently, we are sitting right at 40 staff.
40?
Yes, sir.
Total.
Yes, sir.
Between-
That's for dispatch, support, evidence, even our cadet position, so.
Okay, Ms. Oxenholt?
That was it.
Okay, Ms. Hinton?
I don't know if I've overlooked this or not, but does the budget for the police also include the new tower that wants to get built?
That's under the Facilities Capital Fund, which we'll come to in just a few minutes.
Okay, and I have a second
Okay.
question, if I could. Now that emergency preparedness will be moved to the new police building, I hear, and we've often talked about the tsunami and the earthquake and being prepared for those two, and there's also been quite a bit of discussion about wildfires, and I'm just wondering if that's included in this budget too, for more whatever is needed to educate us about what we need to be prepared for there.
We budgeted $87,000 for emergency preparedness. Now it's above and beyond salaries and compensation for the employees. It includes the following: $30,000 for the caches, as I mentioned, $3,000 for training, drills, $35,000 for the laptops necessary to set up your emergency operations center, a speaker system, $7,000 for some phones that would go into the EOC, $3,000 for the for miscellaneous supplies, and then $3,500 for the annual satellite trailer charge. The city has a satellite trailer that we use for our phone system that we pay an annual fee. Committee member Hinton had asked to add $10,000 for supplies that, as our emergency preparedness coordinator goes out, it can be used as incentives and ways to help go forward with that. So that is one we'll bring back with some information about it.
Thank you.
Ms. Starmer?
Actually, I'm not sure if this is a question for you, Chief, or for you, Mr. Chandler, but maybe between the two of you. As you did your budgeting for your increased staff, you're fully staffed now, is that based on covering our city as it is today, or our city as it is come July 4th?
I'm not sure we can staff our city adequately to be prepared for July 4th, but we will be in better shape than we've been in several years this year with staffing for July 4th. Being fully staffed, we should have all but one of our trainees in the field solo by then. Maybe two still be with coaches. But with the addition of our halftime cadet and filling out the 7 slots that we've been empty for almost 3.5 years, we're going to be in good shape. We're going to draw on the resources from around the county as we have in the past, bringing in from Toledo, Newport, and the Sheriff's Office and OSP. And that is the one day a year that it is an all-hands-on-deck day for us, with the exception of our support staff. So we'll put everybody on the ground and do the best we can with what we have.
Setting aside just that specific holiday, we do budget our police service, we do budget all of our services for the fact that we have a large tourist population. Again, if you look at another community that doesn't have the tourist population, that's 8,000 people, you would see the kind of operation that we have. But we have to staff, especially when you look at the amount of training that especially is involved for all of our employees. It's just really not possible to have an ebb and flow where you have a whole bunch of people you bring in and then you don't use them during the winter. So we do budget for the increase of population we see in the summer.
I would make one plug for you as the state legislature convenes on their budget. So being a former member of Oregon State Police, in 78, they had over 1,000 patrol troopers statewide, and they're operating with less than 300 right now. So as often as not, between the sheriff's office lack of staffing and the OSP lack of staffing, we take responsibility. When they don't have staff on the north end of county, we send officers out of the city to either back them up or help cover calls or stand by on calls until they can arrive. The way we could impact the ability of law enforcement to be effective here in the county is to get OSP back up to staff. When I came here in 1988, we had an outpost here of 5 troopers, and just prior to that, about 5 years before that, there was 12 troopers and a game officers working out of the Lincoln City office. By the time I rotated out in 94, they had closed our outpost, and they were down to about 12 troopers in Newport, and they're now operating with between 5 and 7, depending on where they're at right now. So we are very understaffed outside the city limits, and that impacts us here.
Chief, speaking on to that, do we bill outside agencies? No, okay.
We
Just-
reciprocate, and they
that's it.
do the same for us. When we need them, they come.
Perfect. The reduction for the overtime, now that we're fully staffed, or we will be fully staffed, I look at overtime, and I see overtime as overworked at time, for me personally. And I see, that number is 250, 249, just above 200,000 every year. What percentage of that is 4th of July and New Year's, would you say?
Oh, gosh, that would be something Debbie and I'd have to sit down and
Just as it's not all the time, and they're always, you know what I mean? Just for our understanding of that portion.
And there's some nuances to that, because we'll use some grant stream funds that we get through Oregon Impact and ODOT to have extra DUI patrols and seatbelt patrols, and the grant streams that we get in help with
To
that.
do those overtime.
But yeah.
And then thank you for that. The cameras that you have, is that for all the officers?
Yes.
Do you have, so it's a full-on, there was not a pilot program, it was just you're outfitting all the officers? And the second part of that, in the IT aspect of that, is there training associated? Is there a need for IT to store these, or is there a cost associated, or, the later on costs for the initial purchase?
Correct. One moment on that. Dave, were we planning on one for every officer, or a pool like we're doing with the TASER? Right. But that's one of the
Could you repeat what he said for the?
Yeah, so the program would be for an individually issued body camera for each officer.
Period.
And the cloud-based storage for that data. One of the reasons it's been slow in coming for us is between security cameras, onboard mobile cameras in the patrol cars, and now we're adding video cameras, the amount of data that comes into storage and has to be managed and redacted if it goes out anywhere, to the point of blurring out license plates and faces and everything like that, is a very daunting task that we're really not staffed to manage well yet. And so we're still working out that process.
The other side of that is the public access to that, or the public part of that, as their, and how that would come out if in the event. So that's, that with all the data, and if it's available to be seen. So I understand what you're saying. Okay. Thank you.
Chairman, I had
Yes, sir.
two, you talked about adding some administrative help, I think, an assistant, and adding hours to, is that adding hours to a current staff, or we had heard in the past concerns about police officers being sort of swamped with paperwork and things like that. Is that helping that, are those related? Is that adding staff, is that going to take some of the pressure off the individual officers?
The individual will primarily report to the chief. He is taking on many, many more administrative roles and needs some assistance with that. But her duties, or his duties, his or her duties, will be as assigned by the chief.
I guess, I mean, is that going to help, is that going to be helping our officers maybe reduce their overtime or just make life easier for them?
It's not really going to help our officers that much. It's going to help myself and my command staff, because we're dealing with an inordinate amount of time just dealing with paperwork, phone calls, emails, and that sort of thing. Just kind of a back history, you know, Lincoln City was formed in 1965, and the police department was consolidated at that time. Since 1965, in spite of the growth of the department, they have worked continuously to this point with one records person in the front office. They've gone from a force of 7 to 10 to now we've got 40 people, and we're still trying to do it with one records person that can barely keep up with the court paperwork and the reports. So this position gives us an executive secretary that's exempt so that they can help us with everything from contracts and disciplinary issues right on through the day-to-day tasks that the lieutenant and I and the sergeants face.
My other question jumped to my head when we talked about 4th of July, because we had talked about possibly some sort of education program for visitors or alert, you know, electronic signs or something to notify people before they come to town that, you see where I'm going? Or
Yes.
is that part of, is that in process at
It's
all?
not part of this budget because it's actually part of, it's not part of next year's budget because it's actually part of this year's budget. And as a matter of fact, we're meeting this week to try to finalize everything so that the advertising and everything can begin to go out. We don't want to do it too soon. We want to time it so that it's the most effective advertising we can do.
Any further questions for police dispatch, municipal court?
Okay, Mr. Chair, we're ready to move to Public Works then?
Yes, I believe so.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I'm wondering, as exciting as this is for us,
Why I see how excited you are.
I'm wondering if we could maybe move the agenda and do the public comments.
I was looking at the time, and I was also thinking about that, yes.
'Cause I'm sure the citizens enjoy sitting through all this, but they.
That is a good point, sir. All right, Mr. Chandler, I would like to, if it's with the committee's approval, if we may now move to the public comment section of this.
Public hearing?
Public hearing, sorry, thank you, sir. Followed by a break? And after which we can have a break, yes.
So we have a public comment session, and then we have a public hearing for state shared revenues. So two different.
Okay.
Do both.
So I would like to start the public comment now. And if there's a list there to bring up, anybody? I don't have go-go gadget arms. Go, gadget, go. I know. Thank you. All right. So now it's time for the comments from citizens present, before which I would like to read this for public comments. Article 1, Section 8 of the Oregon Constitution provides, "No law shall be passed restraining the free expression of opinion or restricting the right to speak, write, or print freely on any subject whatever, but every person shall be responsible for the abuse of this right. Be advised, statements and comments by citizens under comments from citizens present or on public hearing or public comment items are solely the opinions and statements of the speaker and are not statements by the City of Lincoln City and do not represent the opinions of the city, its officers, or employees." So the first person I have here signed up is Martin Desmond. All right, if you could just, okay, we'll give one. I'll share and we'll give one.
Does this match what you emailed? You sent by email earlier this week?
Yeah, I got a response back that my email got rejected, so that's why I wasn't sure.
Our strict whitelist. No, if you could just state your name into the microphone, sir.
Yeah, good evening, Chairman Hoagland, Mayor Anderson, City Council members, and Budget Committee members. My name is Martin Desmond, and I have to sheepishly admit that I live at 923 Southeast Bay Boulevard down there in Newport. I'm speaking on behalf of Citizens Climate Lobby and 350 Oregon Central Coast. I know you have a very busy schedule, so I'm going to limit my testimony to 3 minutes. And just very briefly, what we're asking both Lincoln City as well as the City of Newport and the Lincoln County Commissioners to independently set up climate action plans for each of your jurisdictions. And I testified before the Newport Budget Committee last Tuesday, and they've agreed to consider it at their May 14th meeting. I've also testified before the Lincoln County Commissioners, and I'm also going to be testifying at their Budget Committee on May 7th. And we've also met with Lincoln County Commissioner Katie Jacobson. And we're asking for slightly less than $10,000 for the City of Lincoln City to develop a climate action plan. And just want to emphasize that these funds would stay within the city. And I have a brief budget. I'll just sort of briefly go through that, though, a little bit later on. But just as a quick background discussion, the Lincoln County Board of Commissioners passed a resolution to create a convening a public-private climate change partnership last November 2018. And the Newport City Council also passed a resolution in support of that. And then, as you know, the Lincoln City Council passed a climate change motion on March 11th, and I'll just briefly read one line, whereas it is important for the City of Lincoln City to be a leader on the Oregon coast in seeking solutions to this crisis. Just real briefly, a number of cities in Oregon have adopted climate action plans. One of them is the City of Portland, which is obviously many, many, many times bigger than us folks out here on the coast of Oregon. They originally adopted it in 2000. They updated it a couple years ago. And then closer to home, the City of Corvallis adopted a climate action plan in December 2016. And so one of the things that we're suggesting is that it is really important to do outreach to the citizens and that, to find out what the citizens of Lincoln City want. And that's why we're really encouraging, the development of what the citizens want. And we're just sort of suggesting, and certainly the City Council can do otherwise, but perhaps the city's Communities Sustainability Committee might be a good way to lead up this effort. Now, because I'm going to just keep my testimony extremely short, I've just sort of outlined some possible elements of a climate action plan. Once again, this is entirely up to the city. I've also, okay, there's my 3 minutes. So anyway.
You may finish your last sentence, ma'am. You may finish that last point.
The budget here, once again, this is up for, your sustainability committee to develop, but it would just be done by volunteers, pay for printed materials, survey questionnaire, but once again, they may decide to go off in a different direction. So anyways, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
If you just hold on one second. Does anyone have a question? Anybody? Any questions for Mr. Desmond?
Do you have any information from the other cities that have developed this?
Oh, from like the City of Portland?
Yeah, I'm thinking of economies of scale. We don't have to start from scratch.
Exactly. And what I would suggest is you can just simply Google the Corvallis Climate Action Plan. It's about 60, 70 pages long. It provides a nice template, and that would be a real good start, because I'm certainly a big believer in copying and pasting, and that's a good place to start.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Desmond.
Thank you.
May I please have Mitch Gould?
Mayor, City Council members, my name is Mitch Gould. I've been a resident here for about a year now. I am a little bit new to advocacy in this sphere.
in this context, but I have joined the two organizations that Mr. Desmond just mentioned, and I'm very impressed by the work they've done. I've read the request that Martin has put together based on the request that was favorably reviewed in Newport. So I really am very proud of the work that Martin and the people of these organizations have accomplished. I don't think I've mentioned yet, but I have been appointed to the Sustainability Committee here in town. My understanding is we have 3 members right now, and I guess one thing I would ask is that if you can encourage other citizens to step forward and to help us fill out the committee, it would assist us in having a quorum and being able to serve the community. Just over the past 2 days, developments in England and in Scotland have indicated what people feel about the gravity of the unfolding climate crisis. Jeremy Corbyn just today or yesterday told Parliament that we're in a climate emergency, and we have, as citizens, we have to respond accordingly to the gravity of the unfolding situation. This was echoed in Scotland by Nicola Sturgeon, who is the Scottish First Minister. She declared a climate emergency in her speech to the Scottish National Party conference. I think that's really basically all I have to say. I hope that you'll be able to look on these issues very favorably. I think they're very important, and I think a lot of the general public feels this way too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gould. Any questions for Mr. Gould? Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. May I now please have Miss Kathy Sandoval, maybe. I apologize.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council and citizens. Thank you for having me back. I was here 1 year ago, so my first order of business is to thank the Budget Committee for approving our $50,000 request from last year. For those of you who don't know me, I am the Executive Director of the Foundation at the hospital here in town, Samaritan North Lincoln Hospital. The hospital, of course, is under a new construction, a replacement building. It's coming together beautifully. It should be finished in October of this year. And so the time is it's become very timely for us to finish up our capital campaign to finish off that building. The foundation was tasked with raising $7 million. The bulk of that $7 million is for medical equipment, rounded out by things like furniture and office equipment and that kind of thing, for a total of $7 million to make the building actually functional. We're at about $5.8 million into that campaign right now. So I'm here tonight to say thank you for that $50,000 last year and to ask that we get an additional $50,000 this year to complete the original $100,000 request that I brought before the Budget Committee last year. I did present for $100,000 and we were granted $50,000. The additional $50,000 would really help move us forward for our goal for sure. But more than that, or broader than that, it will also demonstrate that there is municipal support behind this project, and that will help strengthen our case as we go to apply for various funding from grant sources. Many grant foundations, grant-giving foundations and organizations like to come in at the end of a project. So the timing is actually quite perfect right now for us to start going after some grant funding to finish this project, because we do see the end line is right there. The hospital will be open for seeing patients in February of 2020. So it's happening quickly, and so we're trying to wrap up this campaign. So really, that's all I've got to say tonight, unless you all have questions for me.
Do you have any questions for Ms. Sandoval? Oh, all right.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Ms. Harlan.
Estelle Harlan. Kathy, as you know, I was a long time on the Hospital Foundation, and the last big project we did was the Early Learning Center.
Yes.
And the city was a complete partner in that. And it's just a wonderful message, not only to the grant writers, but to the community, about how important this is when the city joins with our hospital and the foundation, and we work in this together. And
Absolutely, absolutely.
Beautiful partnership.
It really is, and it makes a big difference. It's a persuasive argument then.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to state that I was happy that we budgeted $50,000 last year, and would remind the members who were on the committee last year that it was with an agreement that we would donate, we would budget the additional $50,000 this year, and I was very pleased to see that it was in the budget this year.
Thank you so much. We're very pleased too, so thank you.
I would beg to differ that there was an agreement that we would budget another 50,000 this year.
Said maybe.
There was a maybe.
There was a maybe.
Thank you very much for
Some
your
of
time.
us who were pushing for it.
Yes.
I won't
All right.
disagree with that.
Thank you very much. Have a great evening,
Thank you
everyone.
very much. May I ask if any other persons present would like to speak? All right, and if it's to the will of the committee, I'd like to take a 10-minute break.
Can we do the public hearing?
Oh, can we do that? I'm sorry, yes. Can we do the public hearing now? Yeah, that would probably be smart. Thank you, Mr.
It
Anderson.
takes short time.
Yeah, thank you.
It's usually very fast. Okay, so
I don't have any language, though, for that.
on page 8, in the general fund, we receive in code 4302003, there's a line item in our revenue called state revenue sharing. We are have in the proposed budget $157,659. In order for us to receive this money, we have to hold a public hearing both with the Budget Committee and the City Council, where citizens can discuss whether we should or should not receive the money, and if there's a specific use to which the money should be used for. So that's the purpose of the public hearing.
Is the language I need to state, like to open the floor for a public hearing?
Open the hearing and then ask for public comment.
We make a motion to do so?
I think you can open it.
Okay, I would like to open the floor for public hearing for the revenue sharing for 2019-2020 budget. And if there are people who would like to comment? Hearing none? Do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Second by Mr. Hallenbaum. All right, all in favor of closing the public hearing? Say aye.
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 And opposed? A nay? Hearing none, motion passes. That's it. All right, now, may we take a 10-minute break, please? We will recess until 8:08.
He emailed these things to us, and what
right, let's skip
What is
this.
that one? It's also
On record.
in the
Oh, I see.
council priorities.
All right,
Oh,
here we
yeah,
go.
Right, right.
A couple more to sit down there. We're at Public Works. Yes, Mr. Chandler?
Yes, we are.
All right. Hi, Ms. Bradley.
Public Works.
All right.
Okay. First of all, before we carry forward, there's something that our chair said that kind of hit me.
Uh-oh.
We are doing a 2020 budget. I mean, 2020, that seemed like not so long ago, like a very long time away. I mentioned to some of our staff, I feel like I'm dancing like it's 1999, not 2020. So, Public Works. We've combined all of the Public Works activities into this discussion. Our hope tonight was to be able to get this far through Public Works. We will consider it a job well done if we are able to make it that far through. The Public Works consists of the street budget. I might point out there's multiple funds associated with each of these different groups. And so as we talk about different changes in the budget, we'll be referring you to different pages where they are within the funds. So anyways, the Public Works includes a street budget. It includes the water, which is both the treatment and delivery. It includes the sewer, which is both collection and treatment. It includes the Lincoln Square budget, which is this building. The capital facilities, which is a wide variety of different capital projects. Vehicle maintenance, the GIS, or the Geographical Information Systems, and the Agate Beach. Agate Beach is a landfill that, since we talked about reducing trash, this is a good discussion to have. It is a landfill that is closed. It's been closed for a long time, but our two cities and county have to continue to maintain that for many more years. And so there's fees that go into the Agate Beach Fund. So with that, we'll begin with, I'm going to refer you to page 23. Because we're dealing with multiple funds, it's important that we begin with the forecasts of where those funds are and where they're going to be. We have forecasted them out through fiscal year 23-24. This first one is for the Street Operations Fund. Now, there's something really important that I wanted to point out to you, and what this actually means. You see some percentages over to the side. We implemented a policy this budget. We looked at our forecasts. We saw that the revenue increases were fairly steady. The primary revenue source for the street operations is the transient room tax. And as Debbie had mentioned, it's going up we're projecting it by 3% over the next few years. When the department heads do their budget, there are things that they control and things that they don't control. For example, personnel. They do control how many people they hire or request. They do not control salaries, and they do not control benefits. Those are negotiated through our union contracts. Okay, all of the things that are listed as operations in your budget worksheets, they're listed under materials and services. Those are things that the departments have complete control over those. So, and then of course they control capital. They do not control debt service if the city has incurred a debt. So as we looked at the forecasts for each of our funds, we started from a point of saying, what is the forecasted revenue? And then said to our department heads, that's the maximum amount you will be able to raise your budgets for the things that you control, which is primarily the operations. Now, it doesn't stick to that completely because there are other levels of services they may ask for it to be added or to be subtracted, but by and large, that was the starting point, and they all stayed with that. So that you'll see on the percentages, you'll see salaries that it's increasing by 4%, benefits is increasing by 7%, a lot of that we're looking at, but we are holding our employees on their operation to whatever the or the revenue projected increase is. And that's the starting point. Then we may add a few things based upon the needs of the operation. Okay. Let me see here. Okay. So as you look at this budget, you'll notice that the revenues or transient room tax, those are projected to increase by 3% over the next few years. You can see that we still have some to go as far as bringing the operating percentage change in line. And then you can see some changes to street capital. This budget is proposing a capital lease for a street sweeper, and you can see that in the $56,000 that picks up this year at the very bottom where it says capital lease, and we'll discuss that a little bit more. Okay. The next fund that you have as part of the street.
I had a question about that page. The motor vehicle tax disappeared. Did it get allocated to a different fund?
It did. We moved that over to the street capital fund. Now, that proved to be beneficial in many ways because it gave a dedicated revenue source to street improvements and street repairs, but it does put pressure because it's no longer an inflationary hedge against expenses. So that will be something we'll watch as that plays itself out over the next few years. The next budget is the street capital financial, or the next forecast, and that's found on page, this is really small, page 26. Now, there's a couple things that we've done in this, in these that we hope will be helpful to you. Again, in street capital, or in capital that is construction, and we have included the capital projects on this sheet. The area that you see that's down on the bottom left where it says capital projects and it has numbers, those correspond with the capital projects list that are in your appendix. So they're in your appendix. There is a page, I think they're highlighted in gray, of the capital projects. And so the first project that we have for $260,000 for this year is listed as item number 1 on that sheet in the appendix. Does everybody know where that is? Okay. One of the things that I wanted to point out that is really important in this fund is that you'll notice that over the years there have been transfers from the street operations fund. There's been transfers from the general fund. Those begin to diminish, as does the fund balance for the street capital, which means by the time we hit 22-23, you're looking at about $1.3 million in capital. For $500,000 of that, we would look towards the overlay projects, leaving $800,000 for all other street projects beyond pothole repairs. That may seem like a lot of money, but it's not. That includes storm drain projects. This is a fund we need to watch out for. It's a fund that we need to try to look towards to find a way to help boost that up a bit, because streets are very expensive, and a $1.3 million doesn't really take you a long ways. So that's one that we need to just watch out. And we'll come back to the capital projects in just a minute as we get to the different.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Where would you be comfortable with that fund?
Probably more in about the $2 million range. Yeah. Okay, so those are the two funds that we have projections on that. So as we go through each of the public works services and goods that we provide, we'll highlight the forecasts that we have on these. Okay. The funds that are associated. Funds that are associated with this budget are the Street Operations Fund, which is page 20 of your budget, the Street Capital Fund, which is page 24 of your budget, the Transportation Development Fund, which is page 27 of your budget, the Storm Drainage Development Fund, which is page 28 of your budget, the North Highway 101 Improvement Fund, which is page 29, and the Intersection Improvement Fund, which is page 30 of your budget. Now, again, it's important to realize, because this is fund budgeting, these have restrictions on how they can be used. Much of the funding we receive comes from systems development charges, which dictates the types of projects that we can use those. We can use on these. So I'm going to just touch base a little bit on a couple of operational things, and then turn this over to Lila to really talk about the capital projects. Okay. All right. As I mentioned earlier, debt service now includes a $56,000. This is account number 6412019 on page 22. It now includes $56,000, which is principal and interest for a street sweeper replacement. We are proposing to do this on a lease rather than a purchase. Some other capital purchases of this nature is that this budget proposes the purchase of another a replacement truck for $34,000. That's budget number 6310101. I believe that's on page 22. 22. It also includes in 6320201 two important projects that we have. We have a little bit of a time, like $20,000 per year at a time, been replacing the street lights with LED lights. This budget proposes to continue that. We also have put $30,000 for traffic calming purchases and installations. The things that we had recently discussed with the City Council, that the most effective tool seems to be the radar speed signs, and so we are anticipating that we would be purchasing some of those. The two overlay projects that we have are Southwest 29th Highway 101 to Beach Avenue, including shoulder for parking in the path, and then Northeast Surf Avenue, Devil's Point, and I'm going to have Lila talk a little bit about those. Again, if you go to the appendix, you'll find that these are located on, it's called Capital Projects Transportation Systems Plan.
What page?
It doesn't list it in pages. It's okay. Lila, you're up.
So we have I'll just go from that capital list. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. And I'll also walk you through a timeline that really fits with all of our public works projects on how long it takes to do the design and survey and permitting process, just so you have an idea of why it takes that year or year and a half to finish a project. And so we're looking at High School Drive on the south side from the highway to Spyglass. And so it'll be by George Moreland, plumbing along that section with some drainage improvements. And we're under design with that right now, and also talking with ODOT because it attaches to the highway. And so we have to permit through them. And then we also have the Highway 101 sidewalk from Holmes Road to Taco Bell on the east side of the highway, and we have that budgeted at $800,000. We went through the survey process, and this might be a good one just to walk you through what it takes from the time you say, yes, you're approved July 1 for this project. So this was last June 28th. We sent in for a survey proposal, and then we received the proposal on July 5th. We signed the agreement July 9th. The agreement went to the city manager for approval on July 10th. We received the executed agreement and forwarded it to our consultant on July 24th, 2018. We started the field work August 6th and received a signed CAD agreement from our consultant. Then, and then we had executed an agreement with a consultant for helping us with some of the other CAD drawings. We received survey files September 14th, sent the survey files to our consultant on the 17th, sent preliminary design to the consultant on September 18th. We received 30% drawings on November 6th. And then we received a proposal for writing easements on January 3rd, 2019. We sent 50% plans to the consultant January 4th. And within all of this, we were also consulting with ODOT and having meetings with them and meetings on site and setting up community meetings for the property owners. And then we had a small wall design along the Sea Echo, and that was January 10th. We received that proposal. And then we went to 75% drawings, January 7th. We received signed agreement to prepare easements, January 8th. And then agreements back on the wall design, January 15th. Sent executed wall design agreements on the 16th, and did some geotech drilling on January 25th. And then we sent comments from ODOT to our consultant on April 3rd. And so we're still in the permitting process and easement process with all those property owners, but we're hoping to be finished this year, and that's just how long it takes to get through these processes, and I've probably left a few of them out.
Was that 3 separate consultants?
Yes, well, there's a CAD.
2 CADs and 1 plan consultant? And that's
Right, and
that's
we're doing
typical?
this- We're actually doing the design ourselves, so those are all the support services for us to do this design.
And that's the standard.
Right.
So when
Right,
does
for the,
construction?
especially on Highway 101.
So when does construction happen, do you think?
I think it'll probably be in the fall. We'll put it out to bid toward the end of the year,
So
so that we're,
18
and we're
months.
trying to stay also out of, so our construction schedule is part of it too, because we don't want to be out there in the middle of summer trying to build something.
Sure.
And so we usually try and wait, for the fall.
18 months from the money to the
to-
dirt.
Right, right. And then we have, I didn't count the council part of it, so we have to
Right,
bring
we
it
have
back
to
to
approve it.
council and have all of you take a look at it.
Ms. Oxenholt?
She answered it.
Okay.
The consults, they were not engineers or,
No, they're CAD, well, they are, some of them are engineers, but they're doing the CAD drawings and getting them back to our engineer.
Question.
And he stamps the plans.
This project that you're talking about, this was approved as part of last year's budget,
Correct.
if I'm correct,
Yeah,
or this
so
year's
that was
budget?
that was my timeline walking through that project.
Right. So then if that money wasn't spent in last year or this year, because it's not ready yet, then that ends up in the contingency fund or the ending fund balance?
No, it's actually in the budget, so this is budgeted.
No, that is correct. It does end up, if money is not spent, it ends up in the ending balance, which becomes the beginning balance next year.
So it's reappropriated.
Because of the process is taking so long, one of the things that we have started with this budget is to try to actually look at these projects as 2-year projects, so that we're only budgeting a sufficient amount to cover the cost of all the design work, the permitting, with the costs coming, because it's creating expectations that are not realistic.
Is there like a subline that you can state that there's money from last year for capital projects? Is there a way to just say, hey, yes, this much money of the beginning fund balance was budgeted for last year's projects that haven't been done yet? I hear you're saying it takes 2 years, but is there a way in which simply stated,
Carry the money forward.
just show it as a gray, not black.
We'll bring that back.
Yeah.
Then we don't have to readdress it again this year, and
Right.
Right.
We'll bring that back.
So-
at the next meeting and incorporate it in the future.
Right. I mean, you understand.
Until it's not.
Right. Okay.
And the other thing we did was, once we get into the plans and the details further with the survey, we increase the cost estimate of this project.
Right,
because
as you
we know
learn more.
what we're up against and
Right.
as far as drainage and those
Right.
things.
Right. Understandably so. Okay.
Okay, so.
You want to go through all of those, or you're just saying that's a for
an
instance?
example of almost
Okay.
every
Okay.
project, sewer, water. I'm
Got
only
it.
going to do that once.
Please. 10 o'clock, Ms.
Okay,
Bradley.
Okay. So,
Sadly.
the other one that has moved forward is Southeast 19th on Highway 101 to 23rd, and we have that budgeted at $480,000. And same process, and then trying to also accommodate property owners and businesses. And then Highway 101, we had that third project that you budgeted for last year was the Motel 6 to Mojo Coffee, about 100 feet of sidewalk, and we have that budgeted at $110,000.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
I have noticed throughout this budget that there's reference to the sidewalk from Motel 6 to Mojo's Coffee. Mojo's Coffee isn't there anymore.
Right.
Can we say coffee shop?
Yeah, from
or-
Motel 6, 100 feet.
Yeah,
north.
yeah,
Okay.
some more
Certainly.
generic reference.
Certainly.
So that 5 years from now, somebody might know what we were talking
Just the
about.
address, I mean.
Yeah, we can do that. We can do mileposts.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like landmarks.
Okay, the next one is some design for the Southeast Third Street flashing beacon and crosswalk. And so we need to do some survey there, and we're also looking at a plaza, because we'd move that crosswalk to the south side instead of the north side where it is right now. And so we have to do some sidewalk improvements on each side.
Right, because
You have
the
that
crossing
on a
is on the
map?
north side.
Southeast Third.
You have that on a map?
Oh,
That's convenient.
It's right here, this white line, so this is the north side. So
it's our crossing that they do.
They're gonna do a
pedestrian.
plaza here on this.
The one-way street.
It's this in between the Mexican restaurant and the now closed Mexican grocery store. So this north side here, then the south side with the plaza in the middle there. Gotcha.
Thank you.
And we'll bring that back to you to take a look at those preliminary plans. And then we are also doing Northeast 14th Street on the north side from Highway 101 to Orr Avenue, or as far as we can go towards Spring Lake on the north side on Northeast 14th, which is traveled and walked, and the goal is to tie it in to 22nd Street where the path is, where the path ended. And so we have that budgeted this year. We're almost finished with some design. We just need to get out and talk to property owners. And then we have Northwest Jetty Avenue from 57th to Keel, and then west on Northwest Jetty to North 59th Street. And, let's see.
I'm sorry, is that last one a sidewalk?
No, that last one's actually a storm project, and I'm low on the budgeting on that. We've surveyed it, and so I need to probably, I'll probably have to roll that one over until we have funding enough.
Is that where the kind of lake develops in the street?
Just, it's a very small one. We actually took care of the big
I mean,
one.
cattails were actually growing in it.
We're going to do some improvements at that, at 57th Street as well.
Good.
Ms. Bradley, when you say you are talking with property owners and things, and to Mr. Noriakis's thing, we're saying thank you to tow truck companies, do we say thank you, or do we?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so we're in that constant communication. And okay.
On Northeast 22nd, we've spent quite a bit of time with all of those property owners, and that project's going very well. And 21st Street paving and sidewalk is completed, and the striping, and there's extra parking there.
So we're in.
The sewer line's done,
Okay.
and they're,
Happy.
we did not have any complaints on that, which
Okay.
I thought we really would because of the motels
Right,
access.
right.
And 22nd Street, we're in close contact with them,
Mhm.
have a fantastic engineer, technician, inspector that's out there.
That's great. That's great.
So-
That's great to hear.
Yeah, it's going well.
Thank you. Mr. Alba?
Yes, so looking back at the last year, I'm sorry, everybody doesn't have this. Last year, you created a list of all the sidewalk gaps. So which of the sidewalk gaps are we addressing this year that we didn't already address last year?
The one on High School Drive, I'm not sure that was actually in last year's budget, but we do have that one.
That's the one that's
And so those three major projects, we moved those into this year's budget.
Right, but we already budgeted those for last year. We addressed that. So
Right.
which of the other ones in here that, in this list of gaps, which ones are we addressing this year?
I thought I saw a 0 for sidewalk improvement.
They're probably catching up.
Yeah.
I think the Third Street flashing beacon
And
design.
then if we can also talk about how we can address some of those, that would be.
Mr. Chairman? Sure. Sort of along that line, I noticed, I was going to ask, on page 26, where the capital projects are all listed, all these same projects, and I noticed under the 1920 proposed budget is $2.4 million, which is $2 million more than the previous. So that's, in other words, that large jump reflects money that was budgeted in the previous year's budget but wasn't spent, and now it's moved forward?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yeah, and we'll give you that breakdown.
okay.
And then in 2021, we do have Third Street, so we were starting the design this year and survey, and then looking at construction next year if it's approved. And then also with the Northwest Kill and Northwest Jetty storm improvements.
And then the Burger, are you going to go down the?
Yeah, the Burger King.
Are those in conjunction with ODOT? Because it
Yes.
has, right, so it's not all, right.
But we're paying for that intersection, and so we'll be able to put we'll have 2 crosswalks, so it'll be
Square,
quick intersections, so it'll be much safer.
Okay.
Yes.
Going on to overlay.
I think Ms. Casper has a question. At the
I
moment.
have a question. When we talk about sidewalk gaps, I mentioned this to you. Our little friend that's been pushed around is the lack of sidewalk from Southwest 32nd to Southwest 35th. And I don't see any mention of that anywhere. And one time it was a school to home walk program. And so is that going to be addressed somewhere in the future?
ODOT, we're going to actually meet with the ODOT tomorrow morning at 10:30 on the Neatsu Path and the Sluts Tribe. So I'll bring that up at that meeting and make sure that they're putting money aside for that
Okay.
particular sidewalk, because they said that they would do that infill.
Okay, it's just a little tiny.
Yeah, we need to make sure that it's not simple, though, because of the storm situation there. So it's not just a straightforward project.
Can you report back what they decided?
The next budget meeting?
Yeah.
Is that-
Okay.
Thank
Okay,
you.
that'd be great.
Ms. Oxenholt?
Are we getting any money from ODOT for any of the Highway 101 sidewalk?
Well, the Neatsu Path, we are from West Devils Lake Road to just short of the Siletz tribal property. And so that's one that we put in for a STIP project, and we'll be talking with them about that tomorrow, moving that forward. So that is a large project. We also have a project on West Devils Lake Road Bridge from ODOT, and so we're handling that project, and so that bridge will be replaced. And I can talk more about that when we get to water as well.
Okay. All right. Moving on.
Okay, so we're bringing back our, so going on to street overlay, we're bringing back Southwest 29th improvement. And
Where are you? We got mixed around there. Hold on.
I don't think the overlay detail is in.
No, go to page 19. You'll find this on other overlay projects on Streets at a Glance.
I apologize, I have that in my notes.
streets at a glance.
Oh, okay. I'm just going to go off my list then. So we have Southwest 29th from Highway 101 to Beach Avenue, and that's an overlay, mainly an overlay, and we do have some sidewalk improvement and some drainage improvement. And then we also have Northeast 36th Drive from West Devils Lake Road, and then 36 to Highway 101 on West Devils Lake Road. And that's 200,000. We have still some, that was my number on the storm improvements. I mentioned that before, sidewalk. So I think that is it on those projects. Any questions on those?
Yeah.
I just had a question on the street sweeper. What are we doing with the old one? Is that a leased one, or?
No, it's very old. It's actually 12 years old. And so what we do, just like the Bacter, we can put it in that agreement, and they give us money off. So you surplus it, essentially.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Sir.
Follow up on the leases. Mr. Chandler, Debbie, I guess going through this, I saw, the Vactor and the hydro extractor and the street sweeper, under lease. Certainly a lease payment negatively affects years out in the future as far as operations continuation. Why are we doing a lease rather than not just paying for it? If you've, in essence, we talked earlier about 500,000 sitting in, the jump ball fund. Why wouldn't we just buy it and have it as capital rather than adversely affect our years in the future as operating costs?
And that's certainly available to be done if you would like. We just put it in the lease because it had the lease, it allowed us to do more with capital this year.
So the question then this committee would have is that, put it into as a capital project
If you want to put it into a capital project, either one or two things would happen. You'd have to find some funds that have not been allocated, such as the discretionary fund that we mentioned, or you would have to take the funds from somewhere else, from another project.
But I guess what I'm getting to is we've watched this excess funds for the time being slowly dwindle because we're hitting some long-term operational things. Granted, it's not people and salaries and benefits, but payments would go out into the future, and all that to me says we're going to be spending our funds earlier, and so I guess mentally for me, I'm going to be weighing the need for, not the need for, because I agree with this need, but against some other proposed capital projects. And is that the right thing to be doing?
We can certainly bring back the options that we think are available, and then you can take a look at it and see what the impact would be.
Okay.
Chair?
Yes.
I thought we put 500,000 away last year for the Vactor.
The Vactor is going to arrive in May, and so it was in last year's budget, but we didn't, what we did was lease to own. It was a 5-year plan in wastewater.
Okay.
So the total cost on it was $2.5 million?
Well, there's a sweeper in streets, there's the Vactor in wastewater collections, and then there's a hydro excavator that we were looking at for water.
The Vactor was last
The Vactor was last year.
So the total cost on the Vactor was what?
It was around 280,000, if I remember correctly. I don't have it with me.
Okay. That's one we'll have to check on.
Yeah, I think it was 50,000 a year, least, that's right, not
56.
500,000, but.
Right,
No.
Budget-
zero.
budget desk.
Come on.
Budget desk.
1 0.
Okay.
Hey, this is a budget.
Oh, sorry.
Zeros. Zeros matter.
Okay, so then, moving right along.
that's it for.
Okay, for the capital, right. So we're into operations?
I'm sorry, we're going to talk about?
Street operations? I don't know, do we go over that?
We don't have a lot to present on that. The street operations is fairly similar.
If
So
there
I'm
was-
really asking just if you have any
Right.
questions.
That's, yes, questions of the committee. Street operations, pages 20 and 21.
Well, Mr. Chair, I don't have on the operation. I guess I'm looking down things I'm waiting under streets to at least throw out as a, catch-all to maybe, you talked earlier about the need to bring some revenue into this area. And I'm wondering if a possibility could be from this committee to make a recommendation to City Council on increasing revenue direct to streets, such as a gas tax. That a gas tax on a seasonal basis, March to end of September, maybe dedicated to two specific streets. The northern from Rhodes End through the villages over to 101, and the other being, I forget what we call it, Hillside Boulevard through the Nelscott Gap, Foothills Boulevard, that would tie in. So if in essence, as you can see, the street budget, there's not a lot of money here to build streets, let alone maintain streets. So if ever those two are going to happen, we've got to generate some additional funding. So I'm just wondering if somehow some, maybe some quick numbers or something on a annual basis that might start building the kitty that could help supplement construction of those two specific streets. That would be one. The other, I don't see in this plan anything has to do with kind of future. I know we haven't gotten to water, and should we just limit it to streets or water?
I mean, I think we'd get to water tonight, yeah.
And I guess on management of runoff, because I see runoff here, and are we really managing the runoff of not wastewater, but rain and storm water? It seems to me to be an area that we've, comes third or fourth down the list of what things we're doing, and I'm just concerned that we don't have it in front of us enough, whether it's a plan that needs to be done or some kind of budgeting, start reserving.
Right, we need to update our master plan, stormwater master plan, and get it in front of council for approval, and then you do the financial plan once you have all those projects in place, because we charge about $15 per house in stormwater fees, and so it takes quite a while to add that up. In comparison to transportation fees on new homes, it's around $800.
Yeah. But I guess my concern is if we, lack of a master plan or a plan on it, do we give it much focus?
Well, we actually do the projects. We, see the problems and do the storm projects like we did in Rhodes End. And we've done storm projects on 69th and 68th. And
So we do them as they create a problem, is
Right,
my point.
right. We're fixing
complaint
problems.
driven.
So I'm trying to get ahead of the
game.
I'd like to get ahead of the game. So I appreciate what you're fixing, and certainly the Rhodes End pond is nice to be gone. But I'm struggling with what we need to do or what would be helpful. But right now, I don't see anything, even on the roadmap
I
to
think
jump at it.
Getting that plan in front of you, it's 90% complete. And so we just need to get it to council and go through that process and then create a proper system development charge for it.
So then does something need to go into the budget to finish the plan? The Storm Drainage Development Fund?
We're doing it in-house, so it's really the financial part of it. So we'd have to hire a consultant to do the financial part of it. And one of the items that I do have in our budget under contracted services is $15,000 for the Transportation Master Plan update for SDCs. So we need to do that one as well. So they coincide.
Okay.
So yes, we can move forward with those. It will take time to add those SDCs up if that's the only funding those. So you're correct, definitely.
Mr. Chairman, just to pursue the mayor's thought about possible gas tax, which is maybe a little scary to think about, but I think we're concerned about if Villages is developed with significant housing and residents there, that it's going to require improved access onto Highway 101, and that's going to be very expensive. And Foothills Boulevard is something we were all hoping for. And I believe Newport imposes a summer tax on gasoline and collects, so I wonder if that's information that we could have to see how much they raise and what the reaction's been, maybe. I don't know if that's but something to think about. So simply a summertime tax, which would mostly hit everybody, but it would certainly draw from the tourists.
I'm not opposed to, looking at that, but it always seems already that our gasoline is higher than the rest, period, already. Already. So.
Mr. Chairman?
Sir.
And I hear you. To me, I think Councilor Mark and I were campaigning last year. I think road congestion was ahead of housing when consumers had something to complain about, lack of housing or road congestion. And as I look at the budget, saying, we're never going to get these things built. So it's a way, whenever I hear those arguments or those things about what are you going to do, I've tried that as a trial balloon on people, quite frankly, to see how bad road congestion really is.
Sure. I just pulled up the state of Oregon's ODOT's. Astoria, Canby, Coburg, Cook Hill, Cottage Grove, Eugene, Hood River, Milwaukee, and Newport have them. Newport has a 0.3 cent from June 1st to October 31st, and a 0.1 from November 1st to May 31st. So they actually have two. They have an on and off season gas tax.
1 or 1 penny.
1 penny.
Right. 1 cent and 3 cents.
And again, I recognize that all this committee could do is make a recommendation. It wouldn't go into the budget, but.
Sure. Yes, yes.
My only comment is that it would be great for Lincoln City residents, the area that we were not charged that extra tax, that it would be visitors only.
Well, that
would be.
Yeah. I don't know.
Sorry, there's a lot more cities that have it. Sorry. I didn't open the whole thing.
Make the Otis gas
30
station.
30 Oregon cities have it. 30 Oregon cities.
Mr. Chair, there's two other things that we've had requests from some citizens who sent me some information and asked if I would pass it along. They were not able to be here tonight. The first one is a request to put in sidewalk on Southeast Orr Avenue from East Devils Lake Road to the end of Weimart. So that would be on the east side of the road? On the east side of the road. That would be $150,000 we've estimated to do that. The second request that came in was to add $3,500 to the budget for neighborhood watch signs. Budget for, so we received a request to add $3,500 so that these neighborhood watch signs could be put up by the city at the request of the neighborhood watch groups.
How much was, sorry, where was the sidewalk again?
Southeast Orr Avenue from East Devils Lake Road to Bymart. And it would be on the east side of the road.
That way. Well, there's, backside of the parking lot has a sidewalk.
I think
The
that's true.
backside of the backside of the outlet mall has a side, there is a sidewalk that you could. That's on the west side of the street.
on the
You
west
could
side.
go from the highway to, there's not a crosswalk across, I mean, I would say a crosswalk before a sidewalk. Do you know, I mean, I don't.
A neighborhood request, because there's so many people that walk from the other part of Orr, not north side of Orr, and they, that's where the intersection is.
Oh,
And
maybe
so
I'm
we
on
have all the new
side.
sidewalk on the north side now with the storage units. And so that intersection is a T, or, well, it's an offset. It's a little bit of an offset.
Sure. I mean,
Okay. Water? Okay. If you will begin on page 35. This is the water operation financial plan. A couple things to point out in this. The first is just a reminder that the water has been foregoing any rate increases and will continue to do so for another year, maybe two, in order to help beef up the funds that will be available for sewer capital projects. We are projecting this budget proposes a 4.1% increase in the total utility rates, which is equal to $2.15. As you look at the line that has a green highlight to it, you'll notice that the transfers that go into the capital fund, which is really where the funds are going to build water systems, they are remaining at about $900,000. They start increasing in 24, 25 and go up from there. The other one to point out is just to be aware that down at the very ending fund balance, it drops too low but it's one that we recognized would happen and because of those delayed rate increases, and it begins to pick up to the $600,000 level that we have as part of our policy beginning around 24, 25.
And it picks up quick because we've got a debt service payment that's ending, 400 and some thousand, so.
And so by the end of this projection, we would be looking at having about $1.5 million that would be available for water capital projects.
You're on page 31?
35.
And do you foresee that length of time being all right to beef it up? You don't anticipate, I don't anticipate, but we can go that long without doing capital improvements?
Well, we are still doing capital. I mean, we're doing 900,000 worth of capital improvements.
Well, that's what we're spending a year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Even
essentially what
with
it's
a
doing is
constant-
it's drawing down your fund balance. And so because of the rates aren't in there, that draws down. We wanted to keep it at about $600,000, but we do drop below that for about 3 years, and then we start building back up again. And again, the purpose of that is that essentially the water fund is sacrificing on behalf of the sewer fund. The next financial plan is Fund 232. This is page 37 of your book. This is the water capital plan. This is where most of your water projects are being done. As you can see, most of the revenues that come from this are transfers from the water operation, so they mirror the financial plan we just looked at. And on the left-hand side shows the projects that are associated with this fund and where and when those funds are to be expended. If you go to the appendix, it's this sheet that has the blue lines in it, and the corresponding numbers, like you have 1 WDLR 21st to 28, they correspond to the numbers on your appendix sheet. Okay? And so I'm going to have Lila go through the capital projects, and then we'll tie up with some of the operationals. But again, before she does that, there are 5 funds that are associated with the water delivery and treatment. They are the water utility operation, which is page 32, the system replacement capital reserve fund, which is page 36, the SDC reimbursement fund, which is page 39, the SDC systems SDC improvement water fund, which is page 40, and the water bonds fund, which is a debt service fund, on page 42. And again, I point out that although all these funds can be used for water projects, not all water projects qualify for every fund, okay, because of the laws that govern those. So, Lila, you're up.
Okay, I'm going to start with the West Devils Lake Road water line project. We've been doing phases of this project for years now. We started on the north 13th side of the highway and went to 21st Street. So we did that in a couple of phases. So we're taking out an old 10-inch steel line and putting in our new C900 12-inch PVC. So this phase is from 21st Street. We have a pump station on West Devils Lake Road, and it goes to 28th Street past the hospital, and we're doing that purposely for the new hospital. And then also it's in conjunction with the West Devils Lake Road Bridge project. And so the bridge is, the water line's on the bridge, and we're going to be boring that project.
Oh, really?
Waterway there.
Are we replacing that bridge?
Yes. Yes,
With
that's the
ODOT.
That's the ODOT project
Right.
that we're managing.
Is it going to, are you taking away the bridge sidewalk or the raised sidewalk there as well? That's staying,
we
because that's
totally
new,
coordinated-
right? Okay.
coordinated that with them.
You just built that.
We would not do that. But you'll have a place to walk while we're doing the bridge.
Thanks.
So that's that project. And then we have Southeast Ore Pump Station, which is right off of 15th Street, if you were going up the hill on Southeast Ore, past 14th Street. So you're on Southeast 14th, you take a right on Ore, you go up a few blocks, and there's a street that is not finished, and that's where our pump station is in the middle of that right-of-way. And so that serves all of D Lake Heights area, and it is essentially coming apart.
Is that the one the road that goes like straight up?
And the pump
And
station
it's on
is
the
at the
north
bottom.
side?
Right, so it's a fire flow, and it's also water pressure. And what we're planning to do is move that pump station up on the reservoir site. We have plenty of property up there, and we'll be able to use the piping that's already existing. And so we're booking that one out for like a 2-year project, so we'll have design and then construction. So it'll probably start in 1920 and then finish up in 2021. That's one that we have online. So those are our two water projects. We completed all of our other water projects from last year.
A couple of other things to note. If you go to page 31, which is the water at a glance, I can note a couple of other things that are of significance. This also includes a pole building at the water treatment plant so that our employees can get their vehicles out of the rain. That's found on page 34 item number 6330101. And then it also includes, as we had mentioned, a hydro excavator with payments of $56,000 for a 5-year period. That's in debt service. The $56,000 includes both principal and interest, and that is on page 34. And so, Lila, why don't you explain a little bit more what that is?
Okay. The hydro excavator, we've demoed one of their units, and they actually, with all the utilities in the ground now, our crews are, digging and by hand, and it becomes very dangerous as far as breaking other lines and pipes. And so the hydro excavator, when they go on site, they can start their excavating before they get locates, because they have to wait for all the people to come in when we have a leak. And so they're able to actually hydro excavate around all the piping and get it exposed so that they can get it fixed. So it'll save them time getting water lines fixed. It'll also assist with water services.
Sounds like it's a power washer and a vacuum.
It is. Yep. Have a great. That's what it is. It's a tank, and
You get a little video of a demo. I'd like to see that.
sure. So
Wow.
it has.
Sounds what it sounds like.
I have a long list. There's probably like a dozen to 24 items of why we should buy this piece of equipment. But
I like it already.
Yeah.
it's safety.
So it's a way in
Faster.
which to get to the thing quicker and
It
faster and
is,
safer and all that
and
stuff.
if
Right.
one operator can take it and get started on a
Right
project
away.
while they're waiting for everyone else
And this
to
is a
show
lease
up.
to own?
It's emergency. Yeah,
Lease to own. Is the sweeper a lease to own as well?
it is.
I
But we
didn't
were
get
going
that
to come
earlier.
back with, more information on
Sure,
that, too.
but I didn't
Oh,
hear.
I didn't hear that
that
earlier either.
Right.
Yeah.
It
that
wa-
changes
is.
the picture.
Right. It's not lease to lease. It's lease to own. Similar to the back truck, hydro, and the other thing.
Sweeper.
That does change it.
A couple other things to note, salaries.
Chandler,
Yes, sir. Oh,
may I have a question, please?
absolutely.
Lila, at the State of the City address, the mayor contended that we were down to 9% unaccounted for water. Is that true?
It's pretty darn close, yes.
That's
Yeah.
astonishing.
I mean, you can't.
Down from
Every drop,
four.
But yes, yes. And I don't have the results back from our water line project that was just finished, was West Devils Lake Road from Highway 101, about 1,700 feet. And so that was another leaking line. It was about 13 feet deep. And so you can't tell, how much it's leaking. And so we replaced that section, and we had replaced another section, which was one of our really large leaks. And thanks
We've
to-
gone
thanks
We've gone from 30 or 35% down to, so let's say 10%.
So say.
In the last 10 years.
2 million gallons a day from the water plant now, and in '07, it was probably 3.5 to 4 a day. So that's how much we've saved, and that's our correlating equipment.
Wow.
And we have one person that's always looking for leaks. And so, and then we also test our meters, because our meters have been in the ground about 25 years.
Yeah,
And so, so we test those and upgrade the large meters.
that's wonderful. Good job.
Yeah, yeah.
How many bottles of water
That's
does that
off to
equate
the-
to, Ron?
I'll bring that back next week. So a couple of other items that we wanted to mention on page 32, salaries, 6101100. You'll notice a pretty significant increase. That reflects a negotiated change in our contract, or it partially reflects it, in which we are changed the way we do on-call duty for our water employees. It used to be that they would get time off for the time that they were on call. We are now compensating them. We're finding that it's hitting the budget pretty hard, but the productivity has increased. And so over the course of this contract, we'll weigh those out and see which is of the greatest benefit to us.
Question on 6201119. That's an increase of contracted services?
Yes, I'm just getting to that. That's a $6,000 increase for a tracer study, and Lila, you got to talk about what the tracer study is.
Hold on, let me get to that. Is that contracted services?
Yeah,
Yeah.
page 33.
that's Oregon Health Department, and I'd have to get a little bit more explanation of that. I can't remember all the details on that one, but it's engineering services for required studies that we have to do on our water lines, so I can get you more information next meeting if you'd like.
The
One
other.
more question.
I'm
Go ahead.
sorry.
Maybe Ron's going to address it, so go ahead.
The other item that I wanted to mention is in the water conservation area. This is item number 6205007 on page 30. It includes $50,000 for a Salmon Drift Creek State Grant.
33.
That is
33.
33.
I'm sorry, 33. That is a pass-through grant. We were receiving it and passing it through for this grant. It also includes $30,000 for the Hancock Watershed Stream Restoration. So Lila, you'll need to explain those two.
Yes, we sent that report out, I think, in council packets before, but it's eliminating erosion areas in our watershed, and so we have quite a few areas that are causing problems, and one of them is ditch cleaning and having a good place to put that debris, and so Hancock is going to allow us to have a site away from the creek for that. So that's done by the county, but the other ones are just erosion areas, and so we'll be fixing those and riprapping.
One of the city council's priorities that they established was some long-term planning. Our Lila and Stephanie have been a part of a conservation committee that has been functioning for several years now, isn't it? A few years.
A few years. Are you talking about the Mid-Coast Water?
Yes. Mid-Coast,
Yes.
what's it called?
It's Mid-Coast Water Management Program.
And last week, we attended one of their meetings, and one of the issues that our city faces is turbidity, and caused by a lot of erosion of the stream next to the road. And so even though some of these projects are outside of the city's boundaries, we have to take care of them so that it helps to protect our water source.
Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
What is merchant fees? Last year was 0, this year is 16,000 on page 33.
Those are the fees that we are charged for accepting payments from credit cards. And in previous years, through the current year, they had been in finance, but in taking a look at them, they're most all utility, water and sewer charges. And so we've moved that into the water and sewer budget out of finance.
Much to the chagrin of Lila.
Hey, I got to meet my 3%, right?
I'll give you this 16,000 if you give me your
Yeah.
Well, I have to tell you, there was a little bit of that, because there was at one point when I said, hey, this is not a negotiation. But, okay, are you ready to move to sewer?
Mr. Chair, I can't help it.
Yes,
but
sir.
I appreciate the pass-through on the grant and all this stuff, but for me, it's still looking out in the future, as Mr. Norikis indicated. I can remember this committee struggling 8 years ago at the same time for a $50,000 high-tech water detection equipment. Then. And we did it. And now look how we've saved the community, millions of gallons of water that were treated and just going into the sand. My concern is that our water comes from surface water, for ours being the municipality. And to me, the only thing I can see us meeting our water needs in the future as we grow is retainage. And as indicated, certainly there's discussion about regional, and it should be retaining. But I believe we need a backup plan, a plan B, and we've done some of these of water tanks around the city. But I don't know how to and what we need to do, but certainly a plan that we are in control of what is our next step for future water. because it's not more water rights. It's not, it's capturing what's running by. And, you know, I don't know how to, whether it's a, and I hate saying this, you know, it's a study or whatever, but somehow we've got to get something on the table that says we're marching towards, you know, two options. A, working with the region. B, doing it ourselves because the region's too slow. Because
Right, and I remember in one of the council agendas is trying to form an intercity or something, a way in which not only us but the communities to the south can participate in a water retention or.
And that's what's going on now with this mid-coast, and that's a good thing. But
actively,
I think we need, if nothing else, a plan of what are we going to do if that takes too long. Because we're bound to grow given climate, warmth, and everything else. We're the only city growing on the coast, so we better have water. I don't know where we put it, so I would ask that it be one of those items on to talk about our last night of budgeting.
Sure. Sure. That's great.
Okay, we'll now move to page 48.
To skip a few, 99, 100.
This is the financial forecast for the street, or the sewer operations. Oh, one thing I need to point out. On these at-a-glances, you'll find it says, it says total streets on several of these that are not streets. Terrible cut and pasting. And the numbers are right, but I just cut and paste the total streets instead of changing it to water, sewer. So if you see that, we'll correct that for the next meeting. So in the sewer operation financial plan, the most important number that you see there is the number in green. You'll see the effects of the rate increases that we've been talking about, so that by the time we hit 2023-24, we're at that $1 million that we were trying to reach. So very pleased. You also notice at the very bottom, the ending fund balance doesn't drop below the $600,000 that we've tried to maintain. So very pleased with how that is working out, and we'll just keep monitoring it. And as soon as we're able to share any kind of an increase with the water fund, we will do so. The next document to look at is page 50. This is the sewer capital financial plan. Again, this is where the capital takes place. Sewer consists of the following funds. The first one is the operation fund, which we just talked about. The next three are capital funds. Systems Replacement Capital Reserve Fund, which is on page 50. The SDC Reimbursement Fund, which is on page 39, the SDC Improvement Water Fund, which is on page 40, and then we have the Debt Service Fund, which is on page 42. My page numbers are wrong? Okay. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lila to talk about the capital projects. Again, in your appendix, if you look for the one that has the green on it, these are our long-term sewer plans, and she'll cover the plans that we have for those. These are contained in these three funds.
If I may, maybe next year the funds be all together, you know, in this line item. Is there a reason why it goes from 36 to 40 to 42 to 39?
Yes.
For that?
Yes. It was a last-minute decision on my part to move the financial forecast together and talk to them at one time.
Maybe you could do a summary like you do on the at-a-glance page.
I will.
Yeah, it's just, it's difficult to, we're holding numbers from 6 different pages all at once, and so it's difficult to hold all that imagery
Okay.
together like that on different pages.
Okay, very good.
I'll work on.
No, well, it's me, so. Anyway,
I
but,
can work
sorry,
off of page
please.
50.
Yes, thank you.
In a row there. So we have purchased a screw press, and that was like a second centrifuge, which you budgeted last year. We have actually purchased that for $361,802, and it should be here in July or August. And so we're budgeting $300,000 for the install, and that is electrical, putting the piece of equipment together, and so we'll go out and get bids for that.
This is, I'm going to interrupt, Lila. This is another one where you would see a portion of it not being completed this year, therefore some of it would go to the fund balance. So we'll try to make sure we combine all those so you see the effect of that.
This was in lieu of the second centrifuge, correct?
Right, so.
To the build.
What we had, we have a building, and we had the thickener, and it's a similar piece of equipment to the thickener, same brand, and so we're able to put it in the same building, and then we'll sell the thickener because of our new process with the centrifuge. We don't need the thickener anymore. That was a Lagoon piece of equipment, and so we'll sell that, and we'll get the new piece of equipment in, and so it's a backup to the existing centrifuge, and we'll be able to bring trailers in and use that as a secondary. Another thing that will do, we have in the budget dredge and pumps and piping to start working on the sludge lagoons. And it's going to be a long process, but we'll be able to slowly put that sludge back into the wastewater plant and treat it and haul it.
Is there, if I may, is there a way in which, or a point in time where we could, if we have more advanced wastewater devices, to perform that for other cities?
Yes.
That are struggling to do
Yes.
that? Is that?
And we're trying
is
to
that a,
coordinate things so that that is a possibility in the
Okay.
future.
okay.
As a revenue stream?
As a revenue stream.
Right, and that, right, that, yes,
that's fine.
thank you for that. Yeah, hey, buddy, no.
We did actually do a neighbor a favor.
Well, sure,
So that they didn't have to go back out to the fields. So Depot Bay would say they were able to bring their last load of what they would have taken to the fields to our plant.
Sure.
And it was $12,000.
Right, but I mean, because
For-
you
for
have
that amount, yeah.
currently, you have a facility where they could dump, like septic services or things like that. You have a way in which people can, not people, but companies
Yes,
can do
it's
that already.
It's our septage receiving station.
Right,
Which
so-
is aging, and we do have that in the future budget
Cool,
placement.
sounds good.
But we don't, what we charge doesn't really cover
Sure,
a $500,000 piece of equipment.
right, right.
And Lila, if we charged more, would we lose the business?
Probably, but it's it's a heavy load on our plant.
Why do we do it?
It's one of those things we've been doing for years. We've always had, actually, before the plant was remodeled, we had aeration basins, and we had grates down by the aeration basins, and that's where they would dump. And so we're taking septic from septic systems in the city, and we have a map of the area. And so it'd be a nice one to probably do a workshop with council again.
Yeah.
So are we subsidizing the haulers?
I'm looking at all those numbers right now, so I'd have to bring that back.
Number 2?
So we have a small pump station in Spyglass that's had some issues for quite a while, and so we're replacing some pumps and getting it level again on the ground. It's been moving, and the power source there is moving, so we're going to fix that. So it's a small pump station upgrade, and it's a small pump station. So, and then we have design of the Nell Scott sewer main design, and that's another one. We're just finishing up with some reports on that force main and the whole line that goes in front of the elementary school. So from Nelscott Pump Station all the way through, and so that would be part of a workshop discussion too when we get that
All the way
report.
up High School Drive.
So the money that's in here is for design, or preliminary.
Preliminary
Design.
design and then implementation.
Chair?
Yes, sir.
Is, Lila, is that this spot where there've been a history of spills, or what is it?
Well, it's part of that Nelscott system, and so it ties into the two new lines going under Schooner Creek, so it's out, that whole area.
And I was also going to ask, there's been equipment at the north end of Schooner Creek Bridge for ages now, and I was wondering, what is that all part of that same project?
The cathetization? Is that
Oh, that's.
Oh, is that the ODOT project?
That's the ODOT
Okay.
project, yes.
I see.
Yeah, so we've been done there, and Northwest Natural was done there, so yeah, that's not us. So those are the three sewer projects.
Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Lila, the Hiltz High School Drive, the one you were just talking about, there have been issues, and so that around the aroma that is
Yes.
coming out of that
Yes,
arena.
Unfortunately, that's right where it changes to gravity in
Right.
front of the elementary school, and so I get phone calls quite often.
Right.
And so
I've-
we're doing everything we can to keep that at bay, but that will be the first, this is a large phased project. We'll go for USDA funds,
You know those,
because it's a big project.
right in the middle of the road, there's those big empty dirt things. Can we put some like lavender bushes in there? Something, some cedar
So
trees.
I have them seal up the manholes, as much as they can.
Yeah.
And I haven't had any complaints lately, but
Wait till it gets warm.
Wait, I was gonna say, let
School's almost
it
out.
cook it up a little bit. Yes, Ms. Walking.
Actually, it was me.
Oh, yes, Ms. Starmer. Sorry.
Lila, as I was looking through this list of projects which spans many years, one of them caught my eye. The design configuration is considered an explosion hazard by present code. Now, I understand codes are typically made to be over and above. So how big of an explosion hazard is this for the Roads End North Pump Station? Because it's not set to happen until 24, 25.
So what that is the controls are in the same room as the wet well and the pumps, and so it says it's an explosion hazard in every pump station that we remodel and upgrade. We, eliminate that hazard, and so that's what we would plan with that one as well.
Dun, dun, dun.
I can't answer that question, but yeah.
Do we have other pump stations like that?
Into the drama here.
Yeah, I have a whole list. No, I'm not joking about it, but we are
We need
fixing
to-
that problem
right.
every time we do a pump station.
And how do you fix the problem?
You move the controls away from the well.
But my concern is this thing sits in the middle of a residential area, so as far as priorities go, that's my question. Should this really be 24, 25? Is this just a little bit of an overstatement? Am I overreacting because I live in Woods End?
So that statement was made when we did our master plan update in 2004. And so it's just one of the DEQ requirements that they're stating these things need to be fixed, and we've been fixing them, but it's taken a long time to get to all of them.
If you go to sewer at a glance, which is on page 44, just a couple of things to finish off the sewer. Again, please note, it says total streets, it should say total sewer. Salaries, 6101100 on page 45 reflects the on-call duty changes that I had previously mentioned. And then as Debbie had mentioned, the debt service that we have is supported by property tax that went through a general obligation bond.
One question I have for total, and Ms. Casper asked earlier, is can we have the total the total energy electric consumption that the city pays out every year? Just that number for total electricity spent.
We can certainly come up with that.
Or do you have that number?
Yeah.
Oh, what is it?
Added it up from the budget.
Oh. I'm sorry.
7,000.
No.
227,850. And the gas that the city uses is 65,900.
I'm saying total for the entire from all departments, the
Yeah.
electricity.
If it's in the budget, that's what this says.
Sewer utility alone uses 425.
Right.
Sewer is a huge component.
727,000.
And the electric power for the sewer utility is the wastewater plant and all the pump stations.
Right.
Yeah.
More than anybody else. All right. 700.
Say wind turbines.
The next item that we have, if you're ready to move beyond sewer, is the Lincoln Square.
So, Mr. Chair?
Sir.
Before we leave sewer, though, I didn't hear anything about the right terminology for water getting into the...
Yes, we've been budgeted for that.
What's
That's
that called?
infiltration and
Infiltration.
inflow.
Thank you. So,
That's a practice that we're continuing. We're not significantly changing the budget, but it is a practice that we're continuing, just as we don't want water leaking out of our water pipes. We don't want water leaking into our sewer pipes. And so we are continuing that program.
and that program is when you, so looking at Northwest 21st and Northwest 22nd, the street was dug up, and was that water and sewer hookups to the houses that, are we checking our lines
Yes.
before we do the overlay?
Absolutely. That's why it took so long to get 21st Street completed, because we had to budget for the sewer line. And so they did a slip line, so they didn't have to dig up the street. And then they also lined the manholes, which were like a brick manhole. And that was part of that project. But the $120,000 under infiltration and inflow in the operations budget. So we have companies come in, we find leaks with our TV cameras in the sewers, and they come in and line them mechanically through manholes. And then the laterals are also brought up to date to the property line when we do a street improvement project.
I guess, Mr. Chair, do we not know where the most infiltration happens? I mean, what I'm envisioning is, I think stuff runs downhill. So as the stuff hits different pump stations, we would know the volume going through, and especially on rainy day, some kind of a baseline.
Right.
But on rainy days, would see more flow, which means more water's getting in at some places. So I'm envisioning that an attack would be not waiting to do our streets, one at a time or as we get there, but no focus on where it's really fluid?
Well, actually, they're checking all of the sewer lines, and then we have our run times on all of the pump stations. And so we monitor that on a daily basis. And so if something is, comes apart, you're going to know about it. But the one area that I believe is the most, it's one that we can't see, is Northeast 2nd Street. It's the island down by 3rd Street pump. Well, it's 3rd Street pump station is where the sewage goes from that area. But it's an island, and there are pipes in the ground there that I believe are probably leaking at some of the joints. And so we're looking at how to bring that project forward.
Okay. Well, and that's what I'm trying to...
That's infiltration into
Right.
the pipes. And so we pump that, treat that. It's just like the water leaks.
But knowing that it puts a strain on their plant, I guess I'm looking for a plan that would back off the strain on our plant during rainy weather. And
That's also part of the line from Nelscott Pump Station to the plant.
So-
I'm just checking, do you
So
know?
it just doesn't feel like, and maybe I'm not communicating it well, or you're not back to me, but I would be looking over here on the capital plan somewhere under, and know which ones we're going to be targeting sooner than later, rather than just when it catches the street.
I'll bring that back to you.
And one last one for how much longer do you think we'll have this sludge removal line item to be as such?
That's pretty much indefinite, as
But-
long as
but-
we're
but we need to
hauling.
make a distinction. Sludge, if you're talking about the cleaning up of the ponds,
Well, it went from 1,000 to 200,000 to a quarter, and up.
you've got-
So I'm trying to see
you've
at
got
what
two,
point will
you've
it
got
come
two
back
parts
down?
of sludge removal in there. The part where we're taking the stuff out of the screw press down to Kaufman Butte, that will
Okay.
always be there.
Oh, okay.
Cleaning out the sludge pits,
Mm-hmm.
we're estimating probably 3 to 5 years to get those completely clean.
Yeah, we're really not going to know how long it'll take until it's started.
Until you do it, right? Okay. All right.
There is one other thing I need to mention on the sewer. Fund 469, the unbonded assessment fund, which is page 58, just an explanation of what that is for those who may not know. Often we extend sewer through improvement districts where somebody is having their septic system is failing. They come to the city. We will work with the area to extend the sewer. They will repay us over time for that. This is where that comes out of the fund. There are no current projects that are in the hopper, and so the fund is just simply says general construction if something should come up. That really is on a requested basis. We do?
Well, yes, we have a requested project on Bard Road.
We now have a project. It is interesting to note on some of these, though. Bard Road will be an interesting one because there's also road improvements that come into play with all of those as well. And so that one will be an interesting discussion. Okay, the next item that we have for the budget is the facilities capital plan, the facilities capital fund.
Page, please.
That, I'm going to look at the
59.
64.
Oh, sorry.
64.
64 is the financial plan.
And, Mr. Chair, I'm going to ask your advice on how to facilitate this discussion.
Okay. What would you like to have accomplished?
Well, this has the potential of being a very long discussion because it is in the Facilities Capital Fund, and I would like you to turn to page 62, which is where we have transferred $1.7 million. There's a few things I'd like to explain, but this is where we hit some real discretionary fund, and this has the potential of being a long discussion.
How about this? You give us the bullet points, and then that will be the first thing we talk about next meeting.
Okay. The most important thing to note in this is that this is the debt service fund from which, or the debt service from which the police building is paid for. That comes out to $616,775, which will be that consistent for the next 30 years. Okay? It's therefore necessary for us to make sure we always have enough to cover that cost as we go forward. This is also the fund for which we have built many of our capital facilities. And when we have had this year, as we looked at an excess of revenues over expenditures, rather than identifying and say, we think this should be spent here, we think this should be spent there, we have instead transferred $1.7 million into that. Now, there are some significant capital projects that we need to mention. The first one is other equipment capital, which it says $750,000. Okay, the primary expense of that is an upgrade to our radio communication systems. We had a study done on the radio systems that we have in the city. There are some weaknesses, and that study gave us a list of things that would need to be done. We have asked our very talented Tony Lasoya to scrutinize that, but the first of those projects is one which we do need to do, and that is a new radio tower. And that is, we plan on constructing that at the same time the police building is being constructed. Last year we had budgeted $250,000. That was just a kind of a, well, initially it was a guess, and then we got the study, and our consultant said, yes, that's an adequate price, but he severely underestimated it. We've only had one, because we're doing it with the police department, or the police building. We've had Emmerich, our contractor, who's been out trying to find contractors for this. And so far, we've only had one, and that price is coming in about $750,000. So we have included that. I'm going to continue to rely on our very talented Tony and Chief Palmer to figure out a way to do that a little bit cheaper. But as of this time, that's what we have included within the budget.
And with there's an intent to lease radio waves or put some other communication things on there, correct?
Yes. There's two approaches that we've been looking at. If we build it, we also want to build it so that we can rent it and gain an income off of that. We periodically receive those kind of requests. The other thing that we've put some feelers out, or we haven't heard back much on it, is to see if any private companies would want to install that and build that, and then we would have space on it in exchange for the use of the land and so forth. And but as of yet, that's not really coming very far. So we decided to put in the budget the full amount of $750,000 to see where it gets us.
Has there been talk of adding wind energy collection onto that as well? Or is that an option?
No, we haven't talked about that. That's a good idea, but we haven't discussed that.
We're building a tower, let's put a big old fan on there.
Other improvements that we have as part of this budget, we have $60,000 for a replacement of 2 HVACs on City Hall, $100,000 for the sign improvements, not sign improvements, but new entrance signs. This is a project we've had in the works for a long time, and we want to move forward with that, so we budgeted $100,000. And then we have budgeted $150,000 for lower parking lot servicing of this building.
Did we the 2 HVAC units that are on the roof, there's 8 total, correct?
We did 8 last year.
We replaced 8?
We replaced 8.
And
we have
2 of those have already failed?
No, we have 2 more. We have 17 HVAC units on the roof.
Is that normal?
For this building.
Can't we put some heat pumps around here? I mean,
know.
that seems like an exorbitant amount of HVAC units. It sounds like it's the old police station.
There are that many up there, so.
Is there ways in which to not do, I mean.
They looked at a boiler and different things like that when they first remodeled this building, and it wasn't feasible.
Well, when was the first remodel? 95. Has there been better technology since then?
Not when it's all put in, I'm sorry. No, we have studies done by, the Energy Trust, and
it's really not.
It's not.
We have to have 17 HVAC units on the roof.
And they last for a good, 10 to 12 years, so. Just 2 more, and it's in such a bad environment.
On the
Final
coast?
thing that I want to mention.
No, I mean, just.
Yeah, we have one
the
question,
ocean.
Mr. Chandler.
The final thing that I want to mention is if you look at the bottom of the Facilities Capital Fund, page 63, at contingencies, It listed as $1,198,366. We've looked at that and said we ought to keep that between $600,000 to $700,000 as we anticipate future debt payments, which would leave about $500,000 in discretionary fund. You do not have to spend that. It can go to future projects if you so desire. Some of our city council members have talked about park developments. Some have talked about transitional housing in partnership with other organizations. Some have talked about streets. So this is some discretionary funds that are available.
Okay,
I just have an idea for some of that money.
While we're doing that, here.
No, but there was.
I don't know. Well, hold on.
No, wait.
Hold on. I don't know if I want to get into what we could do.
It's for this building, it's for the parking garage underneath, and it's bird strips. I mean, people shouldn't have to dodge the you-know-what.
Right. We can try that again. We've done it a couple times, and I'll find something else that works better.
It's a bunch of slingshots. No, I'm just kidding.
Have you tried
I
the
feel-
test where it makes a noise that bothers the animals?
We've tried that. We've tried putting almost like little fencing up there, and I have pictures of the birds laying in that.
Can you just wall it off? Can you just put a ceiling, a flat bottom?
Yeah, we might be able to do something like that.
Some
It's a sprinkler.
Tyvek or
It's a
something?
sprinkler system.
Oh.
Is what that is.
Mr. Chandler, for the signs in and out, I know in years past we've talked about the Explore Lincoln City being part of that, and now that it's in this Facilities Capital Fund, is that now not an option?
No, it would still match. Oh, you mean Explore Lincoln City being a part of this?
Being a part of the entrance, the two signs coming in.
It could.
We discussed that last year. Yeah, we did.
It could fit within that still, yes.
Yeah, so let's look at that as well.
Okay.
That's where he's at.
Okay, yeah, now we're at the end, because then we're going to go to that. So we will start the next meeting with this particular.
The only other one that we have is the Lincoln Square and the Agate Beach, but those can wait until next time as well, if you'd like.
I just had a question. Is the gym exterior supposed to be under Lincoln Square?
No.
I think that's under.
It's under community center.
But it's
Okay.
on page
But you
59.
have it on page 59.
Capital facilities?
It is in the facility capital fund. But in the facility capital fund, there's a community center improvements, page 62, and you see that 35,000 on there. And this is a rollover. This was budgeted for this year, but won't have it spent, so we're moving it to next year.
Oh, I guess this is Lincoln Square Fund, Facility Capital.
Well,
And
Lincoln-
Agate Beach? This is
Lincoln
what
Square,
we're saying.
there's three different funds.
I mean, that's what's a little confusing there.
Yeah.
And we
Sorry.
talked about the facility capital, but I'd like to just bring the other two back. Agate Beach is simple. It's the
Right,
amount we have
that's-
to pay every year.
We have,
Lincoln Square won't take us very long to go through that.
I mean, any other questions for tonight? We do, of this particular thing, we'll talk about scheduling here. Okay.
I have one other question. Sure. I'm assuming, looking at the facilities capital fund, page 62, I'm assuming we moved park improvements somewhere else?
Yes.
That park improvements for 450,000,
Yeah.
that's the Taft Dock, and that's been completed.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right, Mr. Chandler, can you tell us when we're meeting next?
Next Monday at 6 o'clock. We will not need to meet at 5 because you finished the Urban Renewal Agency's
We're
budget.
so good.
Are we not able to start at 5 if?
If you'd like to start at 5, you
I
certainly
would
can.
rather start, I mean.
Yeah, I would.
Start at 5?
Yeah, let's start at 5.
As
that a
long as you
con-
don't go till 10.
Uh-huh.
We're getting
As long as you
finished
have
for
some
this.
non.
Yeah.
All right. Committee will be meeting here at 5 PM next Monday. And with that, we are adjourned.
Well done.
These damn lasers don't figure it out.
Yeah.